Hello and welcome to the BNB show. My name is Brandon. That's Brent. That's Brendan over there. Let me get my hand right. Got to get the hand right. It's hard, it's tricky. That's Brendan over there from the Seahawks Brendon Nelson YouTube channel, joining me as he does here on Thursday and Tuesdays. We do this show, and we are doing a game prep today, looking at the very final, sadly, a little bit melancholy final game of the year here, Brendan, on what has been a pretty fun ride overall. Some ups, some downs, but it has been entertaining. And I just want to say off the top as we go into kind of break this down, thank you for joining me tonight, and thank you for jumping in the Hawks Nest as often as you have this year, as it has been fun being able to break this team down to the depths that we do.
No problem. Happy to be here. Been fun.
Yeah, having a good night.
So far, pretty good. Just excited to see how this all plays out. We got a handful of games this weekend that pertain to us. And obviously, you're kind of a little bit maybe, I don't know, ready for it to go badly, but there's always the other possibility.
There is indeed a few things for us to all track along the way here as we look beyond this game, and we'll talk about some of those kind of secondary parts. Is the Chargers going to be all in on their game? Do they have something to play for with the new? And it's kind of a never-changing situation, Brendan, isn't it? Because they were going to maybe play that Buffalo game, and then they go, well, no, we're not going to play it. Now it's no contest. Now how that impacts? Now the NFL's talking about adding an extra playoff team to the AFC alone. So there's a lot to sort of unpack, I think, kind of within that on the way this kind of whole situation could play out, even with it just being to the final week of the year. But our Seahawks on the first order of business here with this, Brendan, and we're gonna kind of look, folks, I think fairly quickly at this game. We're gonna go over a couple of things with it, but both Brendan and I have to acknowledge as we look at this game coming into it, yes, you've got your Seahawks with quite a few injured guys. Brendan, do you have anything updated as far as the injury report on those Seahawks?
It's not looking great. I think that we had 10 Seahawks not practice today, including Tyler Lockett and Ken Walker. Now, both guys are expected to play, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Ken Walker at this point is kind of getting held out of practice to keep him fresh more than anything, because clearly he's capable of playing. Lockett, I also expect to play as well, but you've also got guys like Noah Fant, who did not practice yesterday, was limited today. There was who else was there? Abe Lucas has been limited in practice, but that's actually probably a good sign. That means he probably will play. Not expecting Travis Homer at this point, not really expecting Phil Haynes. So there are some potential issues with this team's depth. We know we don't have Goodwin. We know we don't have who's the other guy who got put on IR? God, I can't remember all the injuries that we're dealing with right now.
I know it's so many that it's like, holy moly. I'm looking at it right now. So we got Goodwin Disley.
Yeah, Disley. That's the guy I was trying to think of.
Yeah, I figured that's who you meant on that. So we are going a little bit down onto that. Of course, I guess it's maybe only bettered by the fact, or helped by the fact, that of course the Rams are coming to the situation with maybe almost maybe not double, but certainly even more of an injury situation that they're dealing with here, Brendan. They've got already out the gate on the injured reserve so far this year for them. You've got Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Jacob Harris, a wide receiver for them, David Edwards, Allen Robinson, Ashawn Robinson, Alaric Jackson, Joe Noteboom, Jordan Fuller, safeties out for them. Logan Bruss, one of their highest draft picks of the few draft picks they had this year, is also out. That's just the kind of the names that people would recognize. And now it looks like on top of that, Brendan, they've got Ben Skowronek, who I'm starting to pronounce right on that last name. I've been struggling with that for a while. Then Brian Allen, yet another offensive lineman out for them. And then they've got Aaron Donald out, of course, too. And then Greg Gaines and Nick Scott, a safety, also questionable. So maybe that's the one upshot coming into this game, is that you are beaten up, but you are facing a team that's a little more beaten up, and they don't have anything to necessarily play for in this game versus you, who does.
Yeah. You still go into this game and you have to believe that you're in a better situation than the other guys. The other guys, they don't have their quarterback. They don't really have their running back, because the guy they have starting for them right now was a guy they desperately tried to give away.
Yeah.
They don't have any of their receivers. They are missing some offensive linemen, although I think they've got a little more stability there than they did last time we played.
Mm-hmm.
They're missing their best defensive player, probably, in Aaron Donald. They're missing Ashawn Robinson. It's a much worse situation than what we've got, where honestly, a lot of these guys are probably going to play. I think Nwosu will play. I think that DJ Dallas will play. Al Woods will play. Gabe Jackson will play. So by the time we get to game day, it's probably not going to be as bad as it looks at the moment.
Yeah, agreed. I think most of these guys are, and that's where you look at the Rams ones, those guys are just out or IR'd. There ain't any like in between with them of, well, they're kind of fighting through. Maybe we'll do a game time decision on them. It's like, nope, they're gone. So I think these guys will probably tough it out with it. Even though, and we know a lot of these guys are beat up, that extra game of the season's they got to be feeling it on this one. And we're going to probably kind of still need everybody to kind of make it go, because this Rams team is, I mean, as much as the narrative kind of floats over the top of them, they've just been flat out bad this year. They've carved out 5 wins on this year, Brendan, which I think is kind of remarkable considering all of the injuries they've been up against this year for things that they had counted on to work to not be counting on at every turn, from Cooper Kupp going down fairly early to Allen Robinson not stepping forward to Aaron Donald being out on this back half. I would have I think if I looked at that IR from them on the outside looking in on the prior to the year, I would have went, oh, that's probably a 2-3 win ball club at that point when they're losing all of that. But maybe it shows a little bit of McVay's ability as a head coach, that he's been able to get a little bit more out of this roster than really where the talent's necessarily been out this year.
Yeah, and I think the main thing to look at with this Rams team that I noticed that is different from last time is they seem to have found a little bit of competency on this offensive line. Their left tackle right now is Nishki. I don't know if I'm
Nietzsche.
Yeah, who's been around the league for a while. They're actually getting pretty decent play out of him, it looks like. And if they have Brian Allen in this game, which as of right now we don't know, he's not practicing, that gives them a decent foundation, because you've got Neshke, you've got Brian Allen, and then on the other side you've got Havenstein. Now you have an offensive line that is actually kind of competent, and I think that's allowed them to look a little bit better lately. And obviously there was the Broncos game where they really put on a show, and you had the Raiders game where they had the ridiculous last-second comeback on. Now, their last game, they didn't play very well at all, but they were playing a team that was, has bigger and better things in mind than just winning a game against a team like the Rams. So, yeah, this Rams team, I think on both sides of the ball, has found at least something better than what they had when we played them last time.
Indeed. And that's the good news for us, too, is they do have Brian Allen listed as just out at this point.
Oh, really? Really? They declared him out. I know he didn't practice, but I'm surprised they're calling him out already.
Yeah, he's just fully on the out. So I do agree with you. I think it's one thing to look at this Rams moving into the future beyond this year, as we will be looking into that as well, is that if they are going to regain their footing as being a team that can be elite or be really good, they've done a good job with, Allen, Noteboom, Havenstein. That's a solid trio there. If they get those other 2 spots kind of figured out for what they want to do with it, be it this Nietzsche guy or whatever, they could definitely come back to, prominence, because they still have some really talented players across the board here. Otherwise, they've got some older players, though. That roster is starting to get to become an aging roster now, as they're going to start to move through the end of their window there a little bit. So, and they don't have a lot of ability to kind of do much adjustments sort of downstream on this one. So, it's a little bit stacked, but McVay's a legitimately good coach. I think he's showing you that. Sometimes the coaches that do their best jobs are doing it with the rosters in the worst of places at times. And I think McVay's doing a little bit of that here in kind of showing off his muscle as a coach with this a little bit. When Brendan, look to the game that we won last time and start to kind of review what we did exactly, how that game played out, it kind of on the surface of it's not ideal to what you'd like to be doing, which is come into it and run some balance. Geno Smith ends up throwing 39 times. You end up only able to run it 22 times. And then conversely, on the other side of it, you want to put the Rams into a situation where you force Wolford to pass, a little bit like what we did this last week, right? Kind of the same sort of application. And then you want John.
Well, Baker's going to be the quarterback, right?
Well, no, I'm talking about the first matchup here.
Oh, okay.
So I'm talking about the very first matchup, how we won the game. And it was unusual where you had your quarterback passing a lot. You weren't able to run much. Then conversely, on the other side of the ball, you wanted to try to make Wolford throw the ball, but instead you allowed them to run the ball 33 times versus 26 passes. And so they were able to kind of, on the surface of it at least, look like they were getting you, taken care of, not the way you'd like. But we did come out of it with the win. What stood out to you in that first game is what you were able to do for a Rams team. Obviously, they weren't at their full strength even at that first game, or anywhere near that full. We had Stafford and all that, but was it just a matter of, hey, we got Wolford, we could just kind of press down on them, and that was that? Or was there anything else that you saw in retrospect specifically that we did to win that game?
I mean, I think that game was just a reflection of how bad the Rams were, especially at that point in the season, where they could get a game where everything kind of goes the way they want it to, where they're able to control the game and they still lose.
Mhm.
And they're able to lose to a team that had very little running game in that game, because remember, that was Walker out, Dallas out, Homer out, Tony Jones couldn't see because he lost his
Yeah.
contact. So we were down. I think DJ Dallas was limping around in the second half of that game, but
Yeah.
he had to play because we didn't have anybody else except for like Nick Ballore.
Yeah. No, he's
So
dragging his leg the whole half. You just see him
yeah,
pulling that thing along.
yeah, and we were still able to have a fairly productive offense that was able to score enough to win the game. Meanwhile, their offense was able to actually run the ball very successfully, but because Wolford was so bad, or at the very least so not good,
Limited.
limited, it didn't matter. That's just an example of how bad they were at that point. Now they seem to be getting a little bit better quarterback play lately from Mayfield, although PFF strongly disagrees with that. They actually think Wolford's a lot better.
Oh,
And yeah, they're actually getting better receiver play as well, it looks like. Tutu Atwell's really finally, late bloomer, I guess you could call him, because he's already like 38 years old.
yeah. he's he's going to arrive there at some point. He just needs to gain an extra 5 pounds, Brendan. That's all. Just give him an extra 5 pounds to be all right.
Right. So even their defense, like their interior defense, is still really lackluster. But they found some things on this defense that are working a little bit better. I think Kobe Durant has been a nice nickel corner for them. He had the 2 picks on the Christmas game, and he looks like he's been playing better lately. Taylor Rapp is playing better lately, it seems like. So it's a little bit more of a stable team. It's a team where I think if you give them those advantages on a game now, where you let them run the ball first, where you let your offense become one-dimensional pass only, like we did in that first game, you might lose because they're just a little more competent. But to me, to answer the original inquiry, when I look back at that first game, I just think that's just a testament to how bad the Rams are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think that I think they are, Brendan, a little more dangerous. I'm not a big Mayfield guy, but I think that you could kind of lean into some of the limitations of Wolford at the end of the day and realize he can't push the ball up the football field. The Woolen pick, for instance, stands out to me, where Woolen could really squat on a couple of routes in that game because he just knew not only is this guy not going to run past me, you're not going to throw it over the top of me. So what do I got to worry about? And I think this game with Mayfield, he can at least do that type of stuff and make you have to play a little more honesty. Yeah, that's the right word I was trying to say. I think as well, a key in this game that really stands out to me, Brendan, is that we did kind of, for the most part, Akers got a little bit going at first, and then we kind of ratcheted down and got everything kind of held up. But the thing that stood out to me in that game was you really allowed a lot of the fly sweeps to work for them. And that would be the interesting thing to see what Hurt might do this week as far as his adjustments in that, because they really did kind of hit it. Go back. I got the stats right here, Brendan. They had in that football game, you had Brandon Powell went for 3 carries for 45 yards. And then you also had Tutu Atwell go 4 carries for 23 yards in that game. So you did a good job of stopping Akers at 3.5 yards per carry in that game. He had a lot of carries at that, but the other guys were able to get something going. Maybe he did a lot to just try to get tight inside to stop Akers, and that allowed things to be a little bit loosey-goosey on the edges at that point.
Yeah, and this is going to be interesting too, because this is our first full game with no Jordan Brooks. We got Tanner Muse out there now. How's that going to affect the run defense? How's that? Because for whatever we can say about Jordan Brooks, he is fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in theory, he's covering sideline to sideline as good as just about anybody at the linebacker position. But Tanner Muse also fast for a linebacker. I mean, he was a safety in college, if I recall.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be interesting to see how that comes together. Our defensive line seems like it's playing a little bit better. Like the last 2 games, Quentin Jefferson's actually been playing really well. I think he suddenly realized, it's time to make that contract push because I'm probably going to be a free agent this offseason. So,
got some money to make.
Yeah. Some other guys too, like Puna Ford's making a contract push at this point. He's got to figure he's not going to be back. I don't know about some of the other guys on the defensive line, but some of them are definitely going to be out there looking for a new job. And it does seem like some of them are stepping up in light of that. Like a Shelby Harris, I think, has been a little bit better lately. Although, I've always liked Shelby Harris. I think a lot of the things going on with him this year are situational, but I think he's made more of an impact the last couple games. So I do expect to be able to handle Akers fairly well, handle the traditional inside runs. But yeah, you're right. The fly sweep game was the thing that really got to us in that first game. And now you don't have Jordan Brooks. You might not have Ryan Neal, who, by the way, has been your best all-around defender, I think, this year.
Yeah.
What are you going to do here? This is actually going to be kind of interesting.
They're in a bit of a hamstring. I think it's going to be more Abrams snaps. And last week he gave up a couple completions, but you could keep things somewhat limited in that degree of things. I think that the Rams will try to go after that all that much more if they see him out there, which you're probably going to have to run him out there a little bit. I think they try a little bit of the tease Tabor Abram kind of combination to get maybe Tabor as the cover guy and Abram as the run stuffing guy when they can kind of predict that. But you can't always predict that snap in and snap out. But it's going to be a tougher test, I think, because of that this time with Mayfield back there. I do think he's better than Wolford. Would you not agree? I mean, he is. I'm not saying he's great, but he's at least a little bit marginally better than where John Wolford is at quarterback.
Yeah, he is. He's it's a little more believable that he can go out there and have a really good game. Wolford, it's hard to imagine him ever really having a good game, but Baker, he'll have those.
Yeah, no, he can, and he's dangerous in that way. You never know when he might decide to get streaky or something, start getting hot. So, and another guy, by the way, who's playing for a contract right now, isn't he? So, is there any? I mean, we've got a collection of guys coming into this market, and we'll be diving into these quarterbacks more in depth, so you don't have to get to too much into the intricacies of it. But isn't there any of these quarterbacks, and there's quite a few of them that are going to be hitting the free agent market or getting a la released, like a Chris Carr? As I look at not Chris Carr, but Derek Carr. As I look at his situation, Brendan, it looks like they've got to make a decision on him like 3 days after the Super Bowl. And it would appear that the likelihood is actually that instead of being traded, he would be released. If I was looking into what I was reading on that being correct. Is there any of these guys that you would be interested in? Let's just say outside of absent Geno Smith. I think we both say we'd prefer if we have to put him into that mix of any of the guys that'll be out there, from your Baker Mayfields to Carrs to, I don't know, I'm trying to think of all the names, but I was hearing it today and I was like, wow, there's actually going to be quite a few guys, names out there, Sam Darnold's. And I mean, it's not a lot of good names, but there'll be a lot of names. Anybody out there that's jumped out to you might be willing to take a flyer on out there?
Not really. No. Not Baker, not Darnold.
Garoppolo.
Some people are saying that Tannehill could be out there. I wouldn't be that interested in that.
Garoppolo.
No.
Wilson of the Jets.
Zach, I mean, you'd basically get him for a hot dog, right?
Well,
You'd probably come and play for a hot dog, right?
Maybe a bun. maybe a bun and a ketchup packet.
Yeah. I mean, are any of those options really better than just saying, let's give $3 million to Drew Lock?
I can't say that they are. I think the thing that we've learned with Geno Smith this year is that, if you have a quarterback that's not done the best in their first stop, you got to make sure you're analyzing that correctly as to why they failed. And certainly as you see Russell Wilson struggle even more worse with the same kind of personnel around him that Drew Lock did have, I think that would earn a little bit of hope, even to a slight degree, that maybe he could do a little bit of a replication to what Geno did if Geno happens to price himself out of the market.
Right, which is very possible. It wouldn't shock me if Drew Lock ended up being our starter next year.
Nor I. I think that there's definitely, I think that they've probably set it up on the board like option A, B, C, D, E, and if one's getting scratched out to the other, that they end up on E, or wherever Drew Lock is on that. He's certainly one of the options to coming back. I don't know if it's B. I don't know if it's F option, but, or S option. But it's one of those options down that line that they're going to jump on at some point with this, if some of the frontline items don't go. Do you think that is Bobby Wagner having his best season as a pro?
I mean, that's hard for me to believe. I mean, this is a guy who started his career as the starting middle linebacker on 4 straight defenses that ranked number 1 in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I look at this and I'm like, he's on a terrible team with a mediocre at best defense overall. Hard for me to, I mean, maybe individually he's doing some really impressive things, but I look at what he was a part of once upon a time. Maybe the greatest defense in NFL history, that 2013 team.
Yes.
So yeah. I don't know. I know the stats might look nice for Wagner right now, but I mean, all I can say about that is Jordan Brooks's stats look pretty good too. And we all know what's going on with Jordan Brooks. The stats don't tell the whole story. And that's kind of what I would apply to here with Wagner. Yeah, the stats are great. He's how many sacks does he have? Like 7?
6.
Yeah, 6 or 7. He's got some plays made in coverage as well. It's been nice. But when you're part of that terrible team and a defense that really isn't that good, and everything around you just starts to go away, and eventually you're the only guy who can really make plays anymore. Like, really, once Donald, I mean, honestly, this year, who's been able to get pressure on that team? Not Aaron Donald, not really. Even when he played, he wasn't playing that well. Leonard Floyd was okay, but nothing special for most of the year. So somebody's got to get those pressures. And this year it ended up being Wagner.
Yeah. Boy, I don't know. I mean, I heard you saying on him being on those great teams, and certainly he was a key point on those teams, no doubt about it. But those teams to me was about really the collection of full talent you had, rather than it being Bobby playing at a superstar level at that point in time. He was playing a star level, but I look at him this year and goes, he can't control the injuries that happen around him. He's not had any of the Aaron Donald-like protections that people thought he might have going in there, so that he wouldn't have to deal with, let's say, second level blocks and whatnot. I do look at the years having, and I go, man, it's just an individual scale, all things being considered. I don't think he maybe is, but I think he's coming close to having maybe one of his best years. And it certainly tells me, Brendon, that we probably should have been blitzing him a little more often. If he's coming at this elder state in his career with 6 sacks a year, probably having lost a step and a half, imagine what if we had done a little bit more blitzing him throughout the course of his career with that, when he had the step and a half back, when he was a little bit more quicker. If he couldn't have maybe been kind of devastating in that role.
I mean, I'm looking at it, and like, he's being asked to cover a lot less this year. He's been targeted less than 50 times in coverage compared to getting targeted like 80, 90 times the previous 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, I think about those first couple years when he would be like defending Randall Cobb 40 yards down the field and breaking up the pass.
Sure.
Like, give me that over a guy you have to just keep out of coverage the way the Rams do. So no, I'm not buying it.
Yeah. I mean, I hear you there. I think too, last year you had the number of snaps on defense that you had rolling was extraordinary. You led the league in defensive snaps by a wide margin. So it did kind of skew the numbers from the previous year. I'd like to see those numbers kind of more based into what was it the previous years prior to that, where there wasn't as much of the defense on the football field. Because again, he can't do anything about the talent around him. So if he's doing his job, but the talent around him, he wasn't great in coverage with us. I'll give you that. He was bad in coverage with us at times. He flashed okay at times too, but I can't make the comparison to Jordan Brooks, because Jordan Brooks puts up the stats, but then you look at his PFF score and it's dog water. Look at Bobby's PFF score. He's at a 91 on the year, which, that's not just elite. That's superstar still playing status, essentially, by what PFF's viewing him as. But the point stands, he's not being asked to cover. They are asking him to blitz, but maybe that's the best way to use him. That's my point on it too, is it's like, well, if you have a guy like this that's got this ability to do this, maybe the best thing is to kind of lean on and have him do it more than having him do it sort of infrequently, as they did at times throughout the course of his career.
Yeah. I mean, more what I'm saying is this is kind of an instance where I take PFF and throw it in the garbage. I don't buy it. Like, I think that it is a circumstance where somebody has to do something on that defense, and he lost so much around him that it's easier to pick up stats. And at the end of the day, like I said, like, they're keeping him out of coverage. When he's actually in coverage, he's giving up about as much as he usually does. He just doesn't cover nearly as much. And I look at that, and I look at a player who over the last, I'd say maybe 4 years, has become so much worse in coverage. And then I look at what he was when he started his career. Like I said, he was great in coverage.
Yeah,
he was guarding wide receivers 40 yards down the field. Like, that skill set is not there anymore. So it's really hard for me to say he's having one of his best years.
Yeah, no, I do feel you there. It's a totally fair point on that. I guess that's just when I hear the Jordan Brooks thing, I go, well, but Jordan Brooks is at a far lower level, even where Bobby's at right now in his career, I'd argue.
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's just an example of how stats lie.
Yeah, they do. But I do think he's having still a pretty good year at the end of the year. I mean, again, like, he's still got to get those sacks. It's one thing of like, well, nobody's getting sacks on the team. It's got to be on you, Bobby. Well, like, he's still got to get through on a blitz and get those sacks. And I see plenty of middle linebackers getting stonewalled when they try to go on those blitzes right up the middle and not have any kind of way of getting around. He still shows off a good skill with that to be able to, especially our game. I mean, the sacks he got in our game weren't cheapy sacks where it's just like, well, Gino's holding on to the ball and nobody blocked Bobby and he just had the free rush. Like, he'd blow past the block, make an athletic play and then make the stop. But points, I'm with you. I feel you on the point with it. Well, let's look at a little bit of offensively into this game with Walker a little bit dinged up. DJ Dallas running a little bit better, so maybe he's feeling a little bit better with that leg than it was in the first matchup here. With this defense where it is, where obviously the defensive line's a little bit battered and bruised, is this a game a little bit like last week where you try to get it back to a little bit more of the balanced aspect of things? Or do we like the first matchup trying to, maybe work even with the receiver core a little bit light, maybe try to work a little bit more of the passing game against this defense?
I mean, when you look at what the Rams are missing on their defense, it's a lot of defensive line guys. They're missing Ashawn Robinson, who was, I believe, their one tech. And they're also missing, I think, another guy on that defensive line who was, well, Aaron Donald, obviously. Okay, that's
Right.
obviously a big one. I'm looking at that and I'm going, I want to try to run the ball.
Mm-hmm.
That first game we couldn't because A, our running backs were all out, and B, our linemen were kind of getting pushed around. I think partially because the whole building got the flu the week before and was still recovering, and they were
Yeah.
physically, like, I remember some no-name defensive end I had never heard of before getting just absolute physical dominance on Charles Cross a couple times, and I'm like, that's not right. I know Charles Cross needs to hit the weight room, but he should not be getting bullied like that. And I looked at some other plays in that game where we were getting physically manhandled a little bit. And I was like, well, I think that might be the flu that we know hit half the players on this team. So, yeah, I'm trying to run the ball here for sure.
Yeah, and Greg Gaines is also, I think, questionable. So you're right on
Mm.
all those ones. That was another one where he's going to probably try to make it a go, but that certainly seems where they're a little weakened right now. To go after them and try to, with some of the success in the last 2 weeks and run the ball, especially maybe find a little bit of traction with it. I know there's no Phil Haynes here, but they're certainly nowhere near. They're as weak as they've been all year on that defensive line. Alaric Jackson's another guy they had to put on IR. So I don't even think they have really the depth. I think they were like bringing Laurel Murchison in there a couple weeks ago off the street, and he got him a couple sacks in that one Denver game. So that's where I think we've got to attack as well, Brendan, and maybe even just with some of those boring old A-gap zone runs right up over the middle. I'd love to get out in space with the times in this, but maybe just trying to test them up in that middle spot and see if they can hold up over the course of the game, especially if you can kind of stay at it and stay committed to it. But I don't think that there's anything exceptional that they got to do this week that's outside the box of what they've done the last couple of weeks. I like the balance that they've shown off lately. That first game we saw where it was really on Geno, especially with the receiving core kind of as dinged up as it is.
Yeah, I would definitely try to seek balance in a game like this. Because, like I said at the top of the show, the Rams are getting a little bit more out of some of their corners. Like Kobe Durant's been playing better lately. Taylor Rapp seems like he's playing better lately. So, yeah, I would definitely look to try to test that run defense.
So not an exciting game plan this week, folks. It's going to be a little bit just nice balance, bootlegs with Geno, not pretty exciting, but it'll keep this a little bit close, but they could still kind of get out ahead like they did last week. It'll be somewhat close, but you're not running away with it, but you're just staying within the mode of the game plan. I think you eventually get them, Brendan. I think you eventually wear the defense down if you can stay on it in that way, especially with their lack of depth. Say nothing less of the front side guys being injured or beaten up, as in the case of Gaines. He's having a good year. How about that UW kid? He's doing pretty good.
Yeah. Like I said last time we did this, a couple UW players on that Rams team.
I know. Eventually, our Seahawks will draft one of these guys, right? One of these really good NFL players from the University of Washington. Wouldn't that be amazing if they took one of them at some point? Sanchez, thank you for the $2 donation. I appreciate you. It says tag and trade Geno. I think that's a possibility. I certainly do. We were going through the mechanics of this one yesterday, and that's kind of the way it plays out. And Brendan, you can tag him and then find the trade partner, trade him. Trade partner then reaches out to Geno, says, "Hey, let's do a contract." And Geno says, "Yeah." They come up to a contract, come back to Seattle, said, "Okay, we got a deal. You already agree about the draft capital prior, right? Towards what it's going to be before you negotiate with the player." But it's a real possibility, isn't it, Brendan? With all these quarterback hungry teams that exist out there that might think the rosters is a little closer than further away.
Yeah, I got no problem with it. I am wondering what his value would be on the trade market because this whole situation is kind of unprecedented, where you have a career backup quarterback who was a meme. People made fun of him for a decade.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly he's one of the better starters in the league. I don't know what that's worth. That's going to be interesting to find out.
I tell you, I look at some of the recent trades that are just silly quarterback trades that have happened in the NFL. The two that stand out to me are Sam Darnold for 2 second-round picks. What did Carson Wentz go for a second and a third-round pick last year after his experience?
Rough equivalent of a first-round pick combined
right.
if you combined it all together.
Right. And I look at those two guys and where other quarterbacks have gone traditionally speaking when there has been those trades. And I look at Geno and I know it's only 1 year, but it's a damn good year. it's pretty legitimate a season. This isn't just he game managed his way through stuff. 70% completion percentage is nothing to shake a stick at. It'll be well over 4,400 yards when he's all said and done, somewhere around 30 touchdown passes, something like that. I think that could be enough. In my mind, to the floor on it's a second, third round combo. But I could see you getting a place of getting to a purified first round pick, maybe a late first round pick, especially to like a team like a Tampa Bay looking to make the move for him on that. I could certainly see a first round pick coming through. And I don't think some people will be like, there's no way. But again, look at the baseline of recent quarterback trades. It's inflated cost. This is the same reason I want to trade back, Brendon, in the draft. It's because when you have a team trading for a quarterback, be it in the draft and they're trading up in the draft, or you got to go get the quarterback out there on the market, it's always the team having to give up way more assets than you really would like your team to have to pull that quarterback in, isn't it? It always seems to slant that direction.
Right. And the other question is, who are the quarterbacks who are going to be available in the offseason besides Geno? Like, I pulled up the list. You have Brady, and let's assume he doesn't want to retire.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's the case. And then you've got Lamar Jackson. He's definitely going to be playing musical chairs. He's a guy who could end up on the Jets, and it wouldn't shock me.
Sure. 100%.
And then after that, it's kind of the guys you were just talking about: Mayfield, Darnold, Garoppolo, Bridgewater, Daniel Jones, who might just stay with the Giants at this point because they've made the playoffs now. I don't know. And yeah, then none of these other guys, except maybe Taylor Heineke, look like anybody would pursue them as a starter. They're all pure backups. So it's not great. Like, a lot of people are penciling in Brady to go to the Raiders.
I've seen the same thing, but I don't get it. Do you?
I mean, I could see a circumstance where nobody really wants Brady and he just kind of has to take whoever, because he really hasn't been that good this year overall, and his offense, like not his individual stats. I'm not talking about his stats, talking about the offense that he's led has been one of the worst in the league. So maybe it's like the 49ers look at him and go, nah, we're happy with what we got. Maybe he goes to a team maybe he goes to the Jets. He's like, I want to get revenge on Belichick. And they're like, no, thank you. Maybe then it's like, okay, it's Raiders or I'm retiring. Yeah. But you're right. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I could see it from that point where it's nobody else is there. And that is the one team going, hey, this is where we are the retirement place for a lot of quarterbacks going back to the 70s as far as this goes. So come on aboard, buddy. That could be enough. And he's competitive enough to still want to play and still want to go with it. So, but I do think if those guys mentioned outside of obviously Lamar, and the thing with Geno and Lamar, even Tom Brady, it's like a different thing, because Geno does fit into that category of those other guys where it's like, Lamar, you're going to have to pay the $250 million minimum, and so much of that's going to need to be guaranteed. And with Brady, you've got to adjust your whole offense to running the Brady show offense if you bring him in. It's like the Peyton Manning thing, where you bring everybody around and nestle them in. I've heard some scuttlebutt from some people thinking Carroll would make a run at Brady in the offseason.
Man, why wouldn't you just keep Geno then? Like, Geno's been so much better than Brady this year. Is Geno going to cost so much more that you wouldn't just say, at this rate, let's just keep Geno?
Well, Brady has shown a willingness to take a discount in recent years. He still is going to be paid decent, but he has been that quarterback that stood at the head of the class saying, I'll take a little bit less. You could make the argument with a guy like Brady this year and having the downward play as he did. And you look at kind of like, okay, as I always say, excuses or explanations. Gronkowski retires. Okay. So he's gone. OJ Howard gone. So your tight end group takes a big hit at that point with no real keen replacements outside of Cameron Brate. You got Godwin's coming back off of a torn ACL. You lose your center Ryan Jensen at before even a game started, to a torn ACL. Ali Marpet, your right guard, is gone for the year as well due to retirement at the start of the year. Tristan Wirfs was injured through a decent amount of this year as well. Is it that surprising at that point if he doesn't have all of his horses running? I mean, the thing, and I'll say this about Brady, and you can say, you might say, that's why we shouldn't get him, is that he does need all that stuff to get going. But I would argue you are supplying him a little bit of a similar box of goods, so to speak, that he gets to go to here, that he got to go to in Tampa Bay, that has slowly kind of not fully eroded, but just isn't exactly what it was when he walked in there, especially the offensive line, which I would argue is the most key important thing to Brady because he can't get hit. He doesn't want to move. So he's got to have the line holding up in pass protection. Am I crazy?
I I don't know. I don't see it. I mean, Brady's going to take less, but he's not going to take vet minimum. It's
No,
not like you're getting him for some insane discount. I don't think Gino's going to cost that much more. I
it's a
don't.
good point. It's a good
And
point.
Gino's much better than Brady this year. So I don't see the point. I guess the other guy I forgot to mention was Carr, who most Seahawks fans react to with revulsion, in my experience. And I kind of get why. That's another guy who, at that point, just keep Gino.
He's one that's a one where you're going, you've got to really look far beyond stuff to get to the one where you're okay with him. And the big two things people say about him is, well, he's never had a defense that's been better than 20th in the league. Fair point. Well, he's never had an offensive line of any real, who's their great offensive line right now? Colton Miller. That's it. And Leatherwood didn't work out for him. They had to release him in the preseason. There's not been a lot of investment in that offensive line. I do think though he misses a lot of throws.
I disagree with that very strongly. They had a really good offensive line for a while. They had Donald Penn. They had who's the center that the Cardinals traded for the other year?
Rodney Hudson.
Rodney Hudson. They had Gabe Jackson when Gabe Jackson was in his prime. That
Mm-hmm.
Raiders offensive line earlier in Carr's career was considered one of the best in the league. I actually strongly disagree with that. That was a really good offensive line, one of the best.
Yeah, they had a lot of good players there. There was even Osemele was there for a while, I think, too. Osemele and whatnot. And so yeah, he has one point has had a pretty good line. That's what they try to say though. So that's not what my belief is on. I'm kind of with the rest of the Hawk fans on the revulsion aspect of it, where I think he's kind of showing you what he is. I mean, like he's had his opportunities and times, and you can make all the excuses in the world, but you are kind of what you are. And this year with McDaniels not fitting, having an offensive mind like he did, and it's not working really there with Devontae Adams, his college teammate, and still not really working well, you go, oh, okay. Okay. I'm good.
Yeah. And for the record, I know there's going to be one team out there that does it, but I
Mhm.
wouldn't give Lamar Jackson $50 million. I wouldn't give him anything. I think that
No.
I mean, he's missed 2 Decembers in a row. I wouldn't give him anything. Like, I'm not interested in Lamar at all. I know some team will be, but for my purposes, I'd much rather have Geno than Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, Lamar's going to he's due for an injury. I'm not saying it's a revel, but I'm saying it that that's the risk of that deal. And again, for a guy that's not going to let you just sign him to a contract that's 250, 260, 265 million, it's going to be 260 with a lot of that guaranteed, and especially injury risk guarantees put in, which puts you on the hook. And if he becomes a guy that tears his ACL and loses quickness and speed, he's not anywhere near as valuable a player as he is when he has those parts to his game. And I would not want to be in on that. Say nothing of Brendan. You got to give him a first round pick, man. At least one first round pick, probably more for him in that deal to get it done with Baltimore. They're not just going to give him away either, especially when he gets to be the belle of the ball this offseason as far as quarterbacks in the open market, right? There isn't anybody out there that's going into their prime that you can go get like a guy like this. So I think on both Carr's case and in Lamar's case, there'll be two teams that jump for both of those two guys in their own different ways. And I don't want to be either of those two teams.
Yeah, this offseason, we might have to do a show just about like the quarterback musical chairs to see how much demand there could be for Geno. Like we're gonna have to see, okay, who are the quarterbacks who are going to be available, who are starter worthy, and who are going to be the teams that need a quarterback, and kind of do the math and
Project where
see
they go.
and what kind of bidding war could Geno get involved in if we tag him. Might be fun.
That would be fun. Let's do a show on that. So I think we should, because there will be enough teams we got to look at of who's going to get out of what and who's going to be more aggressive, and especially when looking at the rosters that are more ready to win, because that will be the teams looking at Geno type teams will be like this. We're ready to go now. We're not trying to wait. So yeah, let's do it. Let's do a show on that. I love that. Great idea. Osama bin Diesel with a $5 donation. Thank you, Osama. It says the Kraken are on fire in 2023, and when they got hot, the Seahawks stepped their game up. The revenge tour will be extended. Go Hawks. Let's sweep LA. Hey, I like the sound of that. Sweeping LA always brings a smile to my face, Brendan.
Yeah, I did hear the Kraken are playing pretty good. I have heard that.
I have heard that too. And how about those guys? Only second season and already caught a little bit of lightning in the bottle there out there, Osama.
Yeah.
So yeah, nice to see you. And yeah, let's sweep LA. Let's get this done. I want to see it too. Let's just feels nice this year to do that no matter what. And especially just come out of the year with a winning record and where people thought we were going to be versus where we are, that'd be kind of nice on that as well. But Osama, thank you for the donation, man. You are awesome, and go Kraken. I'm gonna have to eventually check a game out. I haven't quite gotten around to one yet, but I will at some point here. Garth Knight with a $5 dono. Thank you, Garth. Says the Lions need to claim their name and win this regardless of helping the local team.
Yeah.
Well, they're talking the talk right now. The players are saying all the right things.
Did you hear KJ Wright the other day, though?
No, what did he say?
He went on one of the shows. It might have been even the Sherman podcast. I can't remember exactly what it was. But he was talking about how, I promise you, when you go out there knowing that you're eliminated, it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
And he also kind of spent some time talking about the NFL conspiracy against the Seahawks. So he's feeling this one.
Ooh, I thought I was out on Crazyville on that one, Brennan. I was about to start putting tinfoil hats on my head when I started going down this line of things, but I'm pretty passionately on board with this. Like I as I say, I don't think it's a matter of, as some people go to the far depths of this, well, the game's rigged. But I do think that there's like, I don't think we get a lot of benefits of the doubt, man. I don't think
the invisible hand.
Yeah, the invisible hand, the hidden hand, like hidden in the shirt like that. Like, we get a little bit of that going on. So I'm glad that KJ is like giving me a little bit of, like I'm not off my rocker on this one, because I've just over the years, especially just kind of watching it, you go, and it could have been so easy to get this one right, wouldn't it?
I mean, some year I think it oscillates, but I think this year in particular, it's just been one after the other, and I'm kind of done with it.
Yeah.
Like this year has been brutal. Last year, I didn't think last year was particularly bad. It just kind of goes up and down from week to week. But this year, it really feels like every single week we have to, like you said, beat the other team plus.
Yeah. So it takes about 10% more to overcome what we're going to get for calls or non-calls, or, let's review this call. Well, that's a clear call. It's twisted the other way. And yeah, there's been a few. I think last year, you're right, it wasn't quite as bad last year. It was just, there was those big moments last year, like the end of the Packer game with the no PI call, or the end of the Rams game in LA with the no PI call on DJ Dallas. It's like, I was doing some searches too for putting thumbnails together, and I like, for this one actually, and popped up that DJ Dallas play popped up on when I was just searching Ram Seahawks. And it's so sad because you got the still of the defender lighting him up, and in the shot you see the ball behind the defender, like he's just like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a lot like that flag on Dallas that got picked up in the playoff game against Detroit. Do you remember this? It was,
I do. Yeah.
It looked very, very similar. At least then they threw a flag and picked it up. And this one, they didn't even throw the flag.
No.
One other thing I want to say about this Lions-Packers game, since we're now talking about it a little bit, I don't think the Packers are that good. If you really look at it, other than maybe this Vikings game, they've kind of just won the games they were expected to win. Like Miami had them dead, and then Tua got concussed and threw 3 straight interceptions, and it was over.
Yeah.
Like they beat, I think, the Rams. They beat the Bears, and by the way, the Bears were actually up big in that game, and then Green Bay had to come back. I think Chicago remembered they're supposed to be tanking more than anything, but like you look at it and you can see their big losing streak was mostly against teams that are at least okay or maybe good. And then once they started playing bad teams, they started winning. So this narrative that, the Packers are so hot, they're so hot, they're on a roll. I kind of feel like, no, they lost to the teams they should lose to, and then they beat teams they were supposed to beat, except for maybe the Vikings. And honestly, at this point, I think you could make a pretty decent argument the Vikings are actually a bad team.
Couldn't you say, if you're going to say the fool's gold of the NFL, it would be the Vikings, of any of the teams that are the top-notch teams out there, or by the record at least?
I mean, they have a negative point differential.
Yeah.
Negative point differential, which is what else need be said?
Yeah.
I think many times point differential does a better job of determining team quality in the NFL than record. It's not like college football where a team can just win by 60 points and it's like, whatever.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it does say something. I think it's something. It's not a whole stat to base everything off of, but it's certainly a stat that gives you it gives you more of a view into the team beyond just the win-loss record, especially if you're trying to predict about where a team starts to fall off, like the Vikings have. Like, this is a team that you can see going through the year, like, they're playing with fire. They're playing it really close to the line. That defense being the worst in the NFL is, you can only play with that so long before you're going to get burned by it. But I think this is a tough matchup for him. First matchup, the Packers going to get more 9 points, Garth, in that matchup. That was at home against Detroit, but maybe there's a little bit also something here with the defensive coordinator with the Lions. Did you see the one-man front that they employed last week?
Yeah, I think I saw the Ravens do that against the Broncos for a couple plays and when they played. I see that sometimes, not often.
I kind of dig it. It's right. That's woo. That goes wrong for you. You know, that's like one of those Colts special teams moment that'll follow you as a coach for the rest of your life. You know. So what were you thinking with the one man front? Just walk me through that one. You know.
Yeah.
but hey, I guess it's gonna work.
There's this one game back in 2006, Ravens Saints. I think it might have been 07, but I think it was 06. It was 3rd and goal, and the Ravens just dropped 11 players into the end zone. Zero man defensive line.
What happened?
Drew Brees just stood there trying to figure out what to do and then threw it away eventually because there was nothing else to do.
Yeah, he hasn't seen that one before. I guarantee he's seen everything in the book, but he hadn't seen that one at that point. So, and he wasn't wanting to scramble at that point, no doubt. He was like, I'm trying not to get hit here.
Yeah.
I'm old. So hopefully they can pull it through, man, Garth. We're fingers crossed. I think they're going to give him the best ever, but I think KJ's right. It's also right. It's human nature. You can get your brain all up and we got to play for wins. We want a winning record. We want to beat the Packers. We want to set the tone for next year. And you just kind of, but we're out of it though. You know, I think that does start to kind of set in a little bit, you know, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Kevin Mullen with the $2 dono. Thank you, Kevin. Is this Aaron Donald's last year? He asked. For F's sake. Kevin's over Aaron Donald.
Yeah, I do think his time as a hyper elite player is over. I will say that.
Yeah, I don't think we're looking at him anymore. Kevin is the best defensive player in the NFL. I think that the new contract he got last year, though, is probably something he's going to want to get through at least a couple of years of to make sure he gets what he can get out of that at that point. I think that was where his decision was going to come into place last year. Do I want to do it now? Okay, if I want to come back, I'm going to give it maybe a couple of years before I call the ball. But on Brendon's point on this, I don't think he's going to be ever at the kind of same point. He had such a very long prime, and he played so many games over the years. You really have to wonder, even with a guy who works out as hard as he does and as committed as he is, Father Time is undefeated, and he eventually catches up to everybody. And especially when you have a lot of miles on those tires playing in the NFL as he has, and tough tires, right? Your defensive line, it's not like you're getting you're a receiver on the outside or something, right? Or a safety that's kind of standing back. You're in a car crash every single play. And for a guy that's undersized, especially like he is, that you would think that would add up maybe a little bit more so, wouldn't you?
Yeah. I think that he'll just kind of level out to being a decent starter from here on out. I think that honestly, this year, I don't know what his PFF grade was. I'm sure it was pretty good, but he was not getting the pressures that he usually did. Like previous years, I would look at his pressure numbers and he would have like 70. He had one season where he individually had like 70 pressures. He had other years where he would have around 50. This year, he had like 20 and before he got hurt. It was not the same at all. So.
Yeah, he was insane, dude. He's got to be looked at as the best 3-tech of all time. I think I really would put him there beyond anybody else. He's on another level. That guy.
I think the question is, how high do you rank him on a list of the best defensive players of all time? Period.
Yeah, that is right. I think you're right about that. And honestly, if we're talking about all time, I mean, he's got every bit of argument to say that he belongs in that Lawrence Taylor-like class. That rarefied air that people put those defenders in. I really think he's got an argument to be made. That was a long prime he's had. And getting the championship as he did, that's kind of like the exclamation point to me to the career at that point where you go, okay, it's undeniable. He is up in that best. Maybe Watt is up in there too with the run that he had.
I mean, I've always kind of gone, number 1 was Lawrence Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2 was Reggie White.
I'm with that. Yeah.
And then I always kind of went number 3 might have been Ray Lewis. Like, you want to talk about longevity. He played way longer than he ever should have, won 2 Super Bowls. And then after that, God, I think at that point you start injecting names like J.J. Watt and Aaron Donald. I don't know exactly where. It's so hard with Watt because he never made it past the second round. But
he's playing a bad organization though too. Like he's got the Texans organization that weren't exactly run, right. He was so dominant though. Yeah. But yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, that list sounds about can't argue with Reggie, can't argue with the minister, man.
Yeah. I mean, also Dick Butkus never played on a winning team, so we can't hold it against him that much now that I think about it.
No, and Dick was good too. I mean, he's great too. I can't quite put him into that realm. I mean, he's a guy that's, and the intimidator and all of that stuff that goes with him is, and he was a great player on top of it. He could take the ball away like no other linebacker in the sport, historically speaking, not just for like the time that he played. But I don't know if he was quite at the level of dominance of the guys like you just mentioned, where a guy like, Reggie White goes to the Packers and he is the singular force to take them up over the top because he changes their defense immediately. And the players from that defense, including Holmgren, have said that very same thing about him.
Did you ever hear the story of when he hit free agency?
About Holmgren calling him and saying this is God calling?
Yeah. I remember watching a documentary on that. That was great. I was like, well, you're kind of playing with fire there, but I guess he appreciated it, right?
Well, but you're out in Green Bay though, right, Brendon? It takes a bold move if I got to pull this guy out here. I got the check, but I'm asking this guy to play out in the wintry wonderland, a small little tiny town, so I got to come in bold. I love it. So folks, and we should probably tell them what the story is Mike Holmgren's a Green Bay coach at the time. And he's trying to court Reggie White, who was by far the best free agent ever to hit the market by that point. And so Mike Holmgren calls Reggie's phone and leaves a message. And he says, Reggie, this is God. You should sign with the Green Bay Packers. And Reggie laughed at the jack. He loved it. And he ended up signing with the Green Bay Packers. So did it help? Did it hurt? Who knows? But it's a great story.
And I think Reggie had said to the media that I'm going to let God tell me where to go.
Oh, that's right. That's the part of it, right? So he had said that. Yeah. I left the most important part of the story out. So
yeah.
Great story though. Awesome by Holmgren. That's a nice move on his part.
And luckily he appreciated it. I mean, it could have gone the other way very easily. He maybe could have not appreciated it.
Oh yeah, it's like I'm signing for. Remember his voice? How he talked. I'm gonna sign for one of these little teams in this division now, Mike. You don't play with God.
Yeah. Remember the story of him playing in the Pro Bowl when like 2 days before there was like this giant hole in his leg, and like he was like really badly injured, and he just said, "I'm going to pray and I'm going to play in that game," and it didn't really make any sense to any of the doctors how he was able to, but he did. It kind of reminds you how the amazing things these guys are capable of. Like what was it, Bo Jackson popping his knee back into place, and the doctors were like, "That's impossible," and he just did it on the field or his hip. Right.
No, it's these guys are those rare athletes that are such freak shows, and White was just that kind of guy. I mean, he had a couple of those moments where he had like a fast healer. I don't know if the power of the prayer or what it was, but he would bounce back and find a way, or just a strength of mind, spirit kind of thing. But he would get back out there, never be held down. But they were just a combination of a lot of freakishness that went into play with all those guys that you mentioned on that list. They weren't just really talented; they were on that whole nother level of talent, that goes beyond that a little bit. But Donald deserves a spot. He deserves to be on that, theoretical Rushmore of 5 or 6 faces. It'd be a bigger Rushmore than 3, but Thank you though for the don't know. Garth, another $5 donation. Thank you, Garth. Says, I'd sign Geno, but these Hawk fans see him as Geno 2 gloves.
Yeah, there are definitely some people. And look, I want to say something. I don't really have a problem with the anti-Geno current. I don't agree with it, but I agree with the potential outcome where we decide, we want to go get a rookie. Like, I got no problem with that. That is a perfectly viable path.
Agreed. I'm with Brendon on this. Is my preference is to bring Geno back and find a common ground on the contract that works both for team and player. But I do think the people that are in the line that are not as much on Geno, like Brendon said, I totally get it. I do. As I've said, I mean, you're looking at this situation, and I think they are looking at this as, let's fit to that blueprint of 2012 and let's align it as closely as we can to that and see if we can replicate the success that we had back then. Not in trying to rebuild the Legion of Boom, but essentially in trying to build the super team out around the young quarterback on the rookie contract. So you're not obviously doing that if you sign Geno Smith. You're not adhering to maybe one of the most important parts, most important tenets of that blueprint. And so to want to go a different degree, to maybe not even buy into Geno being able to sustain this beyond this year. I can get a little bit of that. I understand people get it. Like, it is only one season, and it's a fool in the NFL that lets themselves sometimes get tricked for 1 year. But that's also where I come back to Brendon saying I'm okay because the cost is not going to be $40 million a year. They'll come to a lower end on the salary that makes sense. But I get it. Totally do get it, Garth, and it makes sense. There's a good argument to be made on both sides of that, I think. Thank you, Garth, though, for all the donos, man. You're awesome, brother. Jordan with a $5 donation says there are talks the NFL is taking over doing 8 seeds for the playoffs this year. So let's hope they do that. I don't know. Are you hearing it happening in both conferences? Because I was only hearing
They,
AFC.
it's not happening in either conference. The NFL's already shut that down.
Oh, have they?
They came
Okay.
out like half hour before our show started and said what they're going to do. I think they basically said they're not going to play the game, and if it ends up affecting who gets a home playoff game, they'll decide home field advantage via a coin flip, or they're going to play it at a neutral site.
Okay.
If it turns out the game would have affected something, like if the Bengals would have hosted it in the AFC title game or something like that. But they've already shot down 8 playoff seeds. We're getting what we thought we were getting going into the playoffs.
Should they have gone with the 8th playoff seed? Should that have been the direction?
I mean, I don't hate it, but I mean, at that point, you're letting half the teams into the playoffs, right? It's getting a little silly.
Yeah.
And you know the NFL would probably do it and then realize, hey, that's one more playoff game. That's more money. And then they keep it forever.
Oh yeah. Well, we know they're itching to do this anyway. So I'm not shocked that this was even, kind of raised, because regardless of this particular weird year with this, I couldn't get I was trying to do some research on this, Brendan, and I couldn't kind of figure it out on this. If there is the no game played, as we know that now there isn't, between those two teams, its effect back to the Ravens, whose effect back to the Chargers, and then how much the Chargers are in actually to play their game against the Broncos, which then comes back and of course affects us on the draft pick seeding. Did you get an answer on, did you kind of see how that worked out on that, with that, how that plays? Does that help or hurt the Ravens, the no contest?
Well, the Bengals are officially North champions. Like, they've won the division. We know that for a fact.
Right.
I believe that if the Ravens beat the Bengals and the Bengals and Ravens play each other in the playoffs, they will determine home field via some other method or play it at a neutral site.
But what I'm saying is, what I'm saying is, like, the Chargers trying to get that first wild card seeding, essentially.
Oh, that has not changed. We need the Ravens to win. We need the Ravens to beat the Bengals. If the Ravens lose, the Chargers are locked into the 5. And Brandon Staley's basically already said, yeah, we're going to rest starters if we have nothing to play for.
Okay. But if the Ravens win, then the Chargers have something to play for.
They have to win to protect that 5 seed, because you want to play Jacksonville or Tennessee with Malik Willis in the first round, of course.
Right. Yeah. 100%. Okay. So go Ravens, go Lions. That's our rooting order here. So yeah.
Not appreciative of that either, because they could have scheduled both games at the same time and they chose not to. So now the Chargers are going to know. Like, they keep doing this. Like, I thought the reason why they didn't set times for the last week was to prevent that. And now they're just making it happen everywhere. It's ridiculous.
It doesn't make any kind of sense with the way the NFL's done this last week. They could have made this really more scintillating and had everybody on the edge of their seats watching. And instead they've taken an approach that it looks to be kind of favoring certain teams over other teams, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And maybe they're not doing that, but that's what the intent looks like when you're kind of getting it this wrong, as they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a little bit of a conspiracy theory. It's not originally from me, but I sometimes wonder if the owners like it when Goodell does things wrong, because it takes the focus away from them and it makes everybody hate Roger Goodell. Like, maybe that's why he gets paid so much. Maybe they're like,
100%.
they like to use him as a shield.
Yeah, 100%. And that's just what he does. That's, no doubt about it, man. That's absolutely why he gets paid as much as he does, because they know he's the guy that gets booed when he goes on the draft stage every year, and he becomes the bad guy for everybody to, wave at, So yeah, 100% it's that way. There's almost like no doubt in my mind it's like that. That's why they set him up in that role. And it works. Yeah. People buy into it, right? They don't talk about the owners. They talk about Goodell. And it's like, that's why I never really do, because I'm like, what is it? Like, he's not a tyrant. He ain't running this thing, like, deciding what he wants to do. This is the owners telling him what to do, and he takes his marching orders from them. We've got Kevin Mullen with a $2 donation. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate all the donations today, you guys. You guys are awesome as always in your support. And do please hit that like button if you haven't already here on the show. Kevin with the $2 donation says, should the Seahawks trade day 2, 3 picks for Devontae Adams?
I don't know if it can happen financially. With the Raiders, they might take on too much dead money. And also, that's a lot of money we'd be spending at wide receiver. Adams, Lockett, Metcalf. I think at a certain point here, it's too much.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. It's especially in consideration with kind of how much you're already sort of spending as well on your tight end position, right? So you're already dumping a pretty good amount as it is with that. I think that the Raiders 1 year after their deal, I'm not really buying. I think you've heard a little bit of this Devontae Adams saying, well, if Carr goes, I'll still want to be a Raider because I think he could acknowledge at this point that even if he wanted to cause a kerfuffle and flap his feathers and try to get himself out of town, um, they're not going to do it because again, you sign that big deal, all that bonus money accelerates instantaneously. And they're only through year one of that deal. They're not going to want to eat that dead money unless the Raiders are fully in on just a rebuild mode where the roster ain't ready. We just aren't right. We got to turn this all the way over from the Gruden days. That would be the only way they'd be willing to do that kind of move. But as Brendan said, at the end of the day, even bringing Adams in with the bonus money bleeding off the back end, what is he still going to be sitting at 13, 14, $15 million as a base salary? No doubt.
Gotta believe so, yeah.
At the very least. And even that becomes a little bit, I think, too costly for your Seahawks there. It'd be a fun combination. I mean, Devontae Adams, DK Metcalf. I mean, there is an argument to be made there, Brendan, that like you move Lockett to the slot. There's a lot of that. You make the 3 wide receiver set more of a bigger part of what you do. But boy, I don't know. That's going to be tough on that one.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a better way to do things.
Yeah, I like him a lot, Kevin, but I do just think too, it's just, a couple of things just don't quite make that work. I think I could see where it'd be impactful bringing him in and what it would do for the offense. But at the end of the day, yeah, you got to go other ways. I think there's other problems, other things we got to deal with on this team. Than we need receivers, but not to spend top notch. We need a receiving prospect that's going to be productive for us young. That's what we really need right now. Essentially what we were hoping Eskridge could be. Thank you, Kevin. Garth Knight with another $5 donation. Thank you, Garth. Says, I would love to see Jared Goff get over on the acid dropping guy. Let me say it right. Get over on the acid dropping guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. We, no ayahuasca, I don't think, for Jared on that. So
probably not. Although something, there's got to be some explanation for why he doesn't know that the sun rises in the east.
Hey, man, he's just keeping it chill. He doesn't pay attention to the sun. He's got bigger problems to play. Jared does. So, yeah, I hope he does as well. And good on Jared Goff. He's a guy that, was sort of tossed away by the Rams, thrown to the Detroit Lions organization and cast off. And you're not anything good. Yet he's gone to Detroit and rebuilt his career and turned himself. He wasn't a bad quarterback with the Rams, but he's been able to be a solid quarterback for a Detroit Lions team that has been perfectly built over the time there with him. And Campbell's not necessarily the super offensive guru type guy, but he's done a good job. He's done a good, really solid job for that team this year. Props to Jared.
Yes, last year too, honestly.
Yeah, last year too. He's been solid since he came there. You know what you're going to get with Jared, and there's some limitations there. But he's a guy that can be pretty efficient for you. And especially if you've got a running game that you can lean back on, keep balance and offense, he can get the job done for you. He's got a good live arm. There's a reason he went number 1 overall at one time. So hopefully he can throw through that cold Green Bay, Lambeau, frozen tundra weather this week, God willing. Thank you, Garth, for all the donos, man. Appreciate you. And Wu-Tang Financial with a $5 dono. Thank you, brother. Appreciate you as well. I love the Egyptian headset there, by the way, in the profile. As Dan Campbell wants kneecaps, and they will get his kneecaps, or they will die trying. Also, no mercy against the Rams. We owe them a blowout. Agreed.
Yeah, I like it.
No mercy. No mercy. I agree. Pedal down to the metal, Carroll. All those times. Remember when McVay that one time post game put his finger to his head and looked at you, Coach Carroll, on the field after the game? I outsmarted you, old man. I outthought you, old man. You ain't got nothing, old man. Give him it to him this week. Remind him of it, Coach Carroll. Let him know this week. Pedal down. Let's put him out. And yeah, I just pictured Dan Campbell this week, Brendan, like Inglourious Bastards with Brad Pitt with his little speech before the guys. Yeah. I want scalps. You owe me 10. You owe me 100. That's the scalps. And I want my scalps. So,
if Sue was still with the Lions when Dan Campbell got there, do you think he would have taken him literally?
Oh, yeah.
That would have been, I think they would have had to kick Sue out of the NFL.
I just picture like the close-up shot. Here's a still from the game with Sue. Mm-hmm. Like he's got his mouth on a kneecap as on the ground,
Yeah, I think that would have resulted in a lifetime ban from the NFL for Sue. Like by week 4, he would have done so many things. They would have just had to be done with him.
Well, Sue wouldn't have just bet either. He would have tried to literally rip the cap off. He would
Mhm.
have tried to peel that thing off like the top of a pop can, just
Yeah.
and then look at Dan like, like a dog that's like, you do what you want me to do. What?
Well, he's still in the NFL. It's not too late to make it happen, I guess.
No, you never know. You never know. I mean, Sue might play again next year, and he might give himself another ring this year if he goes to. Though the Eagles are, they're starting to collapse. My whole thinking of them being peaking a little too early. Brendan's looking pretty smart right now, isn't it? They kind of look like they had kind of peaked just a little bit, but hopefully Wu-Tang, he gets him. If there's one coach who could get a team to get past the fact they were out of the playoffs and playing for nothing, there's one coach out there in this league we need who can get that team hyped up still and get them to play hard in that given game. It is indeed Dan the Man Campbell. So hopefully he can be that guy this week, man. We need him. We need that motivational speech. We need him to Al Pacino that stuff, man.
Yep.
Kevin Mullen with a $5 donation. Thank you, Kevin. Says, would you two do a mock draft collab where one plays John Snyder and the other Pete Carroll, and each allowed one trump card to overrule any pick, trade, in any round to use?
God, that would be so hard.
Yeah, I'll be. So Brendan can be John Schneider. I'll be Pete Carroll. I like it though. We'll try to figure out something on that. We'll definitely be doing some collabs on draft stuff. So that's 100%. But maybe we'll try to do a war game where it's like, yeah, he plays Schneider and I'll play Carroll, and it's just me trying to tell him to draft a 5th round guy and him telling me to stay in the pocket.
Yeah.
Trust the board. It'll just be Brendan telling me to trust the board. I'll be like,
yeah. Will Jody Allen be in the draft room this year? What do you think?
yeah, she will be, because it was so popular last year and everybody loved that she did it. And so it's going to be like, yeah, she'll be back in there again. But hey, I want her back in there, even if she didn't do anything or she did do something, regardless of either way, she should be back in there. I want all of the, it's like, call it superstition, Brendan, but I want all of the alignment. I want every person in that room that was in there last year in that room this year, not an extra person added, not an extra person pulled off. The exact conditions, right? The exact conditions that allowed for last draft to happen, I want this year. So, but Kevin, no, we'll be doing, I'm sure, a couple of shows built around doing some draft kind of collabs, doing some mock draft simulator stuff. We're going to get into the depths of all that. I think it's important to do so as much as anything, Brendan, not just because it's fun to do that for draft purposes, but because we are in a unique year where we do have 10 picks, where we do have 4 picks in the first 2 rounds, where we're picking top 5, all the much more reason for us to do those kind of things.
Yeah, and it's fun to switch the randomness on the simulator sometimes and see what happens. Like a couple years ago, I did that, and I ended up drafting a Mac Jones with my 2nd round pick.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was really really random. I think I made Javon Kinlaw go number 1 overall one time. You just turn on the randomness and you see what happens.
Well, I like that. We were running a mock simulator on my side here last night, and they were like having some weird, like they had Will Anderson going like 7th or something, I think. So it needed a little bit of updating on their side with some of the logic they were applying on that one. But now they're fun to do though. It's fun with all the little iterations you can run with that, the trading back stuff and the gathering picks and what's more valuable on this. And there's so many ways you can go here on this as far as this upcoming draft, but it's fun and we will be doing it for sure, man. So as we wind up in doing the draft coverage, we're going to be covering this stuff deep, no doubt about it. Thank you for the donation. And thank you, Dupree Squid, for the $5 dono. Says, if the Ravens beat the Bengals and the Ravens are set to play the Bengals in the wild card round, home field advantage will be determined with a coin flip.
Right. Yeah, this is what I heard. And I guess that makes sense. What surprises me, though, is the NFL seemed very flat-footed here. Like they had no idea what to do, even though they said, oh, we're just going to do what we were going to do if we had to cancel the game because of COVID. Mm-hmm. Because, remember, they planned for that, supposedly, and they were like, well, we never had to do it, but we'll just use the COVID plan in case this game doesn't get finished. And then it took them until now to announce what they were going to do. I was like, why didn't you just go and use what you were going to use 2 years ago? I don't get it.
Yeah, I agree. They were completely flat-footed on this one. So they don't, it may be a little understandable, but at the end of the day, whether it was a guy getting injured on the field or, hey, the stadium had a lightning storm come through that completely shut a game off where we couldn't have him out on the field at any point. Like, you do want to have some kind of built-in, okay, if this does happen and we've got to move a game to something, what is the alternative plan? What is our backup plan? And they did not seem to have any kind of backup plan, for the situation. It almost seemed like they were still trying to find a way to make the game get played at some point really deep into this week where there's still, is there a way we can somehow restart the game up? Can we do like a Saturday and then we'll have them to the, and like, no, just, you got to cancel it out. So the whole thing kind of felt begrudging in the way that they arrived at this whole thing, not the way they wanted to do it, but the way kind of some of the blowback from public kind of pushed them into the direction of doing it this way instead. Just a little bit. Thank you though, Dupree. Appreciate you letting us know on that for the deal. It'll be interesting to see if a coin flip determines it, but it's a wild and wacky year this year in football, huh? Kind of a weird one. Guard Knight with another $5 donation. My God, Garth, thank you so much, man. You're awesome. Says, what do you all think Roger does wrong? He has a what brother, and his decisions seem common sense. I can't say that word because I'm gonna get struck on my channel if I say that.
I actually didn't know about the brother.
I didn't either.
Unaware of that. But just off the top of my head, like the Ray Rice thing, the Tyreek Hill thing, burning all the Spygate evidence before anyone else was allowed to see it, the way he handled the almost lockout in, I think it was 2011, when he actually allowed preseason games to get canceled when, everyone's making plenty of money. It's not like the NBA at that point when the NBA was actually, the bad teams were losing money. No, every team is making a ton of money. You can definitely make everyone happy. Like, I don't know. Sometimes there have been times where it seems to me that Goodell just intentionally makes the wrong decision every time there's a difficult decision to be made.
Yeah, I see the same things. I can't really add more to what Brendan just added there, Garth, because I think that I'm right in alignment with what he said on those action items that he had, especially when it comes to being punitive and handing out penalties as they do. It really does seem arbitrary, and it doesn't seem to be set to any kind of standard, and it just sort of seems willy-nilly to whatever he's feeling that given day. And I've seen us be hit with suspensions at times, which will just come out of nowhere. He just decides, okay, now this suspension goes for this situation that you weren't even necessarily convicted on. But now the players gave up that control to Goodell to allow him that power, but it doesn't make it any better when he makes stupid choices with that power then that he wields. So that's the part that I would hold him responsible for as much as anything, Garth, because everything that Brendan just said on those things were probably things outside of maybe the labor agreement stuff, and the owners wanted to get a couple percentage points more in their labor deal. All of the other items you mentioned, I don't think the owners were really in his ear about Ray Rice or the other stuff. He got a little bit, I think, of the ability to decide that on his own with what he wants to do with that stuff. And there weren't good choices. They didn't go in the right route with that, in my opinion. But thank you, Garth. Appreciate the donations, man. You're awesome.
I mean, in hindsight, I think you could even say Deflategate, because like the scientists came in and were like, the temperature dictated the pressure of the ball or whatever. And he's like, I don't care. I still want to suspend this guy. I'm not going to let this go. And then eventually he got his suspension like a year and a half after it happened. I don't know. Looking back on it, that whole thing was kind of weird.
It was weird. And again, if you're going to have investigations like that do, whether it be filming or whether it be the ball being deflated, the NFL, I hate the baseball's done this as well, like the Astro cheating scandal, where it all just becomes like, how can we sweep it under the rug? As opposed to what you should be doing is the opposite, in the sake of having the competitive balance and all of the, the competitive, whatever being called into question, I guess, whether or not what we're watching is true and real or whatnot. So, with the burning of the tapes and with everything being done in the background on that, it's all to kind of save face from an NFL standpoint. And that stuff I don't like that as well. The truth would have been more, I think, more appreciated amongst NFL fans. I understand they've got to protect the shield and all that stuff, but when it comes to that kind of stuff, then you are going to look like the bad guy a little bit because of that.
Yeah.
Garth, thank you. Another donation from Garth. Holy moly, Garth. Appreciate you, man. Says, I've been wanting Harbaugh to coach Broncos, but I remember Pete getting the best of him for years in the pros. Jody Allen needs to not be in the room. She was good last year, man. Garth, she was good last year. And how about the Broncos? So the Broncos, Brendan, reportedly, this could be incorrect, but I took this story like this. The Broncos are looking for coaches, and all the coaches are going hell to the no as far as going to Denver right now. So they go to Harbaugh, and we're like, we want you, Harbaugh. And he's like, yeah, I don't know about that. I like Carolina. They're like $20 million a year.
I mean, why wouldn't you just stay at Michigan? You're never going to have to worry about, like, you've made the playoffs 2 years in a row now. You've got a big time quarterback coming back next year, McCarthy. I think he's going to get hyped like crazy. He might even be a Heisman candidate. I don't know. And your royalty there. I don't know. I'm starting to think maybe he just stays at Michigan because, he's got a good thing going.
Well, I think that's a solid point on it. what about this though? I mean, what about taking more of the Coach Carroll route of this, right? Because Coach Carroll could have come back to the NFL from USC probably after his first national title. Probably could have gotten a job. Now wouldn't have been an ideal necessarily place, but he could have gotten a job.
Mhm.
Maybe Harbaugh looks at the situation as well and goes, I go back to Michigan another year, and maybe there's better jobs out there with teams that are a little closer position to succeed than going to Denver and having to wade my way through the $250 million contract and no draft picks for a couple of years, or the Panthers that don't have any quarterback hope really to be had there as far as anybody to pick up. And I think he's going to probably go to the pros this year, Brendan. But if I was him, that's what I would be thinking of is, am I getting the ideal situation this offseason, or am I just, I want a situation. I want another job. And that's what's driving me on it. Cause I think that's what Carroll did that was smartly here, right? He waited for a place where he truly was going to have the power and the control, and he's got the owner that's going to support him in the way that he wants to be supported. So he went to an ideal situation in Seattle to really unleash his vision fully. And I think if Harbaugh's got that same kind of feeling, that's where I would match. But it feels like if he goes to the Broncos, to me, he's not doing that. That feels like to me, I just want to go to a team. I just want my chance, you know? And the market cooled a little bit for him last year after the Minnesota situation. It wasn't like a lot of teams were really vying for him at that point in time. So,
Right. Well, Denver has to get somebody though.
oh,
And,
it's, yeah, look,
I'm trying to figure it out.
From Denver's standpoint, I think it's a smart move on their part, Brendan. Going to them and going to Harbaugh and going, look, we acknowledge we're not going to be able to pay you $10 million a year or whatever. We got to sweeten the pot because you've got to get through all this stuff. We've got to commit to you for multi-years, understanding that, you know, you've got to get through this Wilson thing, and you very well may not be able to fix him. And I think that they're acknowledging that a little bit in that money that they're throwing at him at that point to try to sway him over. And it might just work. And from the Broncos standpoint, I don't think that they could do any better than Harbaugh. That is the top of what they could pull in right now. Sean Payton was always a pipe dream. Harbaugh is probably the best kind of coach that they could pull in for what they needed to have done, because he can come in there and you know, dirty up a game. He can reduce down the capacity of Russell Wilson, right? He can kind of just manufacture that offense a little bit, as he did like in the days of like Kaepernick or Alex Smith before that. And maybe bring out a decent team, maybe give them a little bit of hope with that defense on top of it. So I think it's a dream hire for the Broncos. I just don't know if it's the best situation. I don't think it's a dream landing spot.
Well, somebody just sent me a tweet, and I want to read this real quick. The NCAA is set to allege numerous violations against Michigan football, including a level 1 violation against Jim Harbaugh for failure to cooperate with investigators. So is he going to run to the NFL like Carroll did?
Well, there you go. He said the stage is set in the same way, right? Because Carroll was under you're right. Carroll was under the same thing with USC, with the allegations that were, and maybe the sanctions that were going to be put on that organization. And I don't think Harbaugh's going to want any of that at that point at all. I also have wondered, you know, when he went back before Brendan, it was before the NIL stuff was there. And I have wondered a little bit if Harbaugh's been a guy that, even when it comes to recruiting, now I got to recruit you and I got to figure out how to pay you. And that for a lot of these coaches that may even still love to be college coaches, there may be a part of that of like, if I'm already paying them, why don't I just go to true pros at that point? Why pay kids and then have to still deal with kids on top of that? You know, that could be an extra layer to the coaching level of the college game that just Harbaugh's not really feeling, you know, and especially like you said, if there's sanctions like this coming down, he'll absolutely run to the NFL at that point. And then he'll take what offer I'm guessing he can get, because he's not going to want to come back to Michigan with sanctions on them. And, you know, just as he's getting that program turned around. God, what is the NFL? What is it about though? What did they matter? They got NIL money now. What could you, what is he practicing them too hard? Is that what that is?
I mean, that sounds like a Jim Harbaugh thing to do.
Yeah, it does. It does indeed. I mean, that's a possibility, but boy.
I mean, it's got to be better than Brian Schottenheimer.
Yes. I would certainly take it over that.
What can you imagine if people are talking about that, man?
I can't either. I can't believe that Wilson would have enough sway in that locker room to be able to be like, here, this is the guy you guys got to get. This is who I want. This is who I like. You haven't earned the right to ask for anybody at this point. Pipe down. You can just hush your mouth. You know, like we're going to get who we're going to get, and you're going to be happy with who we get, you know, a little bit. You'll eat your dinner and you'll like it. So I don't, but again, the thing that this bottom line might come down to, Brendan, if you miss out on Harbaugh, who's going to be the true, really good candidate that wants to go to Denver? Who's going to really want to go take on that job and where it's at right now, you know, in that division?
Yeah. Yeah. It's not easy. And, you know, some people are saying like Ben Johnson, but I don't think Denver can afford to get a first-time head coach. I think they need somebody who's done it before.
Right. They just ran down this road and had the same problem with doing a first-time head coach. And Wilson kind of ran right over the top of him. What you're going to need is somebody that can kind of put him in. Now, it wasn't Wilson like Hacker wasn't a great coach. So it's not like Wilson's the bad guy here, but just that it didn't work together well. It wasn't a good pairing. You're going to need, as I've mentioned for a long time with Wilson, I believe this going back to his time here, he needs a coach who can lock him in. Kind of just, here's what you're going to do. This is what you're going to do. And you're going to do just what I say, run it this way. And he's going to resist against that. He's going to go, I've always done it this way, though. It's like, yeah, I know you've always done it this way. This is now the new way you're doing it. And a guy like Harbaugh, I think, is strong-minded enough to do it, but I don't think all coaches are. Not for a guy like Wilson necessarily walking in that room with all of his years and experience. And so, yeah, I don't think that you might end up landing on Schottenheimer just because there isn't a good candidate to go out there and get. There's nobody who wants the job. And I think it's a real possibility, absent them doing like they did with Harbaugh here, where they just tremendously overpay for a guy and sort of make him, yes, you'll be bad for a while here. Just let dry your tears on these dollar bills. Just here you go.
Yeah. And one of the narratives I see from some Broncos fans is that, Harbaugh wore out his welcome and the players were sick of him by the end at the Niners. I don't think that's the case.
I don't think so either. No,
I don't think that happened. I think that there was a battle between him and Jed York, and York won because he's the owner.
And Balky, the GM.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it. It wasn't really, it wasn't the players at all. It's maybe there's a couple that grumble, but look, that wasn't where it was. It was Balky. It was him Balky in the front office. It was him being difficult to work with on that level, of course, reportedly, but Balky didn't last there long after that point either. So, who was the secret sauce on that? And I'd reckon that it was most likely, Balky's starting to do maybe some good things there with Jacksonville to a degree, but I still say that I've long said, I think Harbaugh's a good coach. I think that what he's done with the Michigan program, turning that around, it's very equivalent to what Carroll did with USC, and that he was going to Michigan and they were in the same disrepair that USC was in when Carroll got there. It wasn't like they're riding high and this is the 1990s Michigan team going to the Rose Bowl every year. This was a team down on its luck, and he took him around. That Niner team, when he got there, after who was it? It was Singletary was the head coach. That wasn't a stacked up team. That wasn't a great team. He brought them up into prominence. And with a guy like Alex Smith, the quarterback, where you are a little bit held back by the quarter, solid, not great. So he'd be good. He'd be good in Denver. That's the best they could ever hope for right now. They should be celebrating on the streets if they bring Harbaugh in there, considering all that goes on. But thank you, Garth, for all of your donations. My God, man, thank you. Henry M with a $5 donate says, my draft strategy, trade down and accumulate 5 to 6 picks between 25 and 64. Draft best player available. Thoughts? Trade down and accumulate 5 to 6 picks between 25 to 64.
Well, I don't think that's realistic. This isn't Madden. In Madden, you can do stuff like that because if the CPU thinks the trade is relatively even, they'll just do it. But I don't think it's realistic to say you're going to trade down and accumulate those picks in that range, because some teams don't have multiple picks in that range. And for this draft, I would say I really don't like this strategy, but I guess I'll leave it at that for the moment.
Yeah, Henry, I think he's on track with this. This tier 2 group of this that I've looked at so far, I'm not blown away by their talent. This isn't a strong tier 2 part of the draft that'll last anywhere from about 13 to probably about 70 players will be tier 2. If you look at the recent history of our Seahawks in drafting from pick 25 onward, it's been a little bit of a mixed bag. And you've had your general manager and coach at separate times both say that it's been very hard to pick in that place to find those guys. It's kind of a wing and a prayer a little bit at times versus knowing what you're truly going to get. Evidence of this is LJ Collier. Darrell Taylor happened to kind of wait and see what we can get him to, round out into. Rashad Penny, of course, who's been good when he's been on the field, but hasn't been good on the field. Malik McDowell. I'm probably forgetting somebody, Brendan, but there's a couple of names down this list in recent times that have been picked in the spot. Jordan Brooks, there's another guy. So, you've gotten those kind of guys recently versus what you could be getting if you're picking late teens and top 5. I think if I'm moving back, Henry, for me, I'm moving back to pick up first rounders in the future. Future draft capital to me is more important than this year's draft capital. And again, as we've seen time and time again with these teams that take that risk of, I'm going to give up a future first round pick and roll the dice and hope that I'm not bad the next year and that you're not getting a top 5 pick. What we've seen in recent history is that team that's rolling the dice on the other end of it, counting on those picks to be high, it tends to be high. And so I would more go with that than trying to drop back into this draft. It's just these guys aren't, a guy like Jack Campbell or Henry Toa or even Drew Sanders that are just the linebackers alone. Those are guys that are going to be picked in that range, and they're just not that good. They're just not going to have that huge of an impact, I don't believe, at the next level. They might be solid players, but if we're stacking up 6 of those kind of guys,
yeah. I mean, I might be okay with trading down a little bit from our top pick, but I'm definitely not trading back to like that range. That to me is like the worst thing you could do in this draft. That's how you end up with a lot of guys who I don't know about. Like we were going through some of the edge players a few weeks ago. We really like Will Anderson. We really like Foskey. And then after that, you were a little not so sure. There were guys like Andre Carter, Jared Verse, the LSU guy, Ojulari, and you were just kind of like, on some of them.
I am. I've watched a lot of these guys' film. I'm probably through 80 guys in this draft, Brendon. And that means 80 guys of not watching their highlights, 80 guys of watching their highlights, watching their film, diving into them, watching whole games of them playing. And they're not bad prospects, but when we're talking about picking in that range, Henry, I want to get value at that point. I want a guy at that point that's going to be, I'm picking him 30th, but he's got the talent of a top 15 guy. And that's not really the guy that you're going to be picking when you grab in that range. You're going to kind of be on that, well, we get some of this, but then he's got these as his negatives that he brings that we can't really overcome. But he does have these pluses he brings that's kind of nice to have. And let me take you back as well, just on a final point with this. Let's go back to what was it, 2017, Henry. We tried the same kind of strategy where instead of it being in the 25 to 64, you win at the end of the third round with what do we have? It was, I think, 3 or 4 third round picks at the end of the third round and then 1 fourth round pick right at the top of the 4th round. And you came out of that with Shaquille Griffin, Amara Darbo, Tedrick Thompson. Maybe that was the Rasheem Green one, and then Lano Hill, I think were the collection. So you came out of that with Shaquille Griffin being the best of those players, and he wasn't all that great. So it hasn't worked kind of going down that road before. And those would kind of, all these things coming together would give me some hesitancy of applying it here. I think you want to be picking if you could, you want to definitely be picking in the tier 1 group at least once. And you want to be at the top of the tier group if you can be on the other side of that. I'm not against trading back a little bit, but try to fit within those same kind of parameters. I would say if we do make a trade would be the smarter approach. Thank you though, Henry. You're awesome. Appreciate your donation. I think we're almost caught up here. I got a little bit behind on that. Adrian XA with a $2 donation. Thank you, Adrian X. Says W Media saying quarterback 1, 2 still good at 4. Please no 5 though.
Okay, so what he's saying is that the media is saying a quarterback's going to go 1 and 2. And therefore, if we pick at 4, we can still get one of Anderson or Carter.
Okay.
But if we pick at 5, we probably don't. And that's when it becomes like Miles Murphy or trade down. And this is what a lot of Seahawks fans are saying, like trying to figure out how to make this all work. Because I think a lot of people think somebody will trade up for Stroud at number 2, like the Bears will trade down with the Colts or something. So, yeah, if we are at 4, that's actually a big difference between 4 and 5.
Yeah.
So what I would say is that, the Colts Texans game is actually kind of huge for us.
Yeah, we need the Colts to win that game, right?
Yeah, we need the Colts to win, so they pick behind Denver, even if Denver wins, because Brandon Staley already kind of showed his hand. He basically said, if that game doesn't matter to us, we will rest starters.
Right. No,
I will say the Broncos could lose to the Chargers backups if they play the way they did against the Rams on Christmas.
It's possible. It's absolutely possible. And we'll see where Denver's at as far as Denver being all in or not on that too, with where they're at with their year, because it's their best interest to play all of their guys that they need to play, or they're going to try to start maybe resting a few of theirs too. So it's in that Colts Texan game, good luck, predicting that with where the Colts have been. I mean, aren't they starting like Sam Ellinger in that game?
At this point, they may as well start Jeff Saturday.
Yeah. Just have him go out there in the field and try to roll. So we'll see on that game. That's definitely going to be a dicey one, and it could go that way. I would offer that it's no guarantee if we end up at 5 that means that we don't still have one of Anderson or Carter, because there is still the real possibility that some team does fall in love with Levis at that point and move up to get him. I still think there's a real possibility you see 1, 2, 3 being the quarterbacks that go in this draft. Even though that might look a little unlikely at this point, I'm starting to see some of the buzz going around Levis as I thought it would be at this point, is he will start to get, Levis is going to shine more and more now post-process. People are going, his stock's not going down. It's only going up as we go through whatever you land at Levis. You may have a personal opinion, you hate him, the consensus and the draft pick pundits and the front offices around the league will have this guy elevating up through this post process significantly, and maybe enough to get up there to where we're able to still have our chance at one at Anderson or Carter, even if we happen to be fitting at 5. So have some hope still on that. I understand where people are like, no, there's no chance, but you never know. And it also does need to be a team that needs in Carter's case, that needs a defensive tackle. That's the other part that has to be a team on there that wants to jump on him at that point too. And there's also, let's face it, I mean, you get to 4, Brendon, you could find a team that's very much unlikely of falling in love with the Paris Johnson kid or Skoronski, the other left tackle in this draft, right? Because tackles, there usually tends to be one left tackle that goes in the top 5 every single year. That always seems to be the case. So this is a very fluid situation. I don't think that just because we landed 5, it necessarily means that it's a death knell for our chances of getting one of the 2 best defenders in this entire draft.
Yeah, in my head, Levis as a Colt just makes sense for some reason. I can see him in that uniform, that helmet. It feels right.
It feels right to me too. I could absolutely see it. So it's, and I can see them being the team that trades up to go get him. I think he's going to, I've just had this feeling for a long time. I think it's going to way that it plays out, Brendon, where he's going to move up. He's going to move in the top 5, 100%. Now, is it ahead of us at 5 or not? I don't know. But then even if you're at 5, Brendon, like let's say the 2 defenders go, Stroud and Young go, we're at 5, Levis is on the board. You can't tell me there's not going to be a team that's going to want to move up to 5 then to get Levis if we're not taking him there, really. And that's where then now you're talking about getting that draft capital that's still really sweet. Even if we are missing out on Carter at that point, maybe the consolation prize is you're coming out of this with another, treasure trove of draft picks. I mean, that could be the upside. Thank you, Adrian X. Mark Sanchez is in the house. What's up, Mark? It's good to see you in the house, buddy. Thank you for the $10 donation. Says, realistically, if we go to the playoffs, can we make a run? Or is this just another shot to Russ saying we don't need you to be successful? I'll let Brendon
if we go to the playoffs. I think that if we played the Vikings, we could beat the Vikings. Like the Vikings are incapable of blowing anybody out, but I don't think we could beat the Niners. That would be the other team we could play. I just don't. Maybe I shouldn't say that. They have Brock Purdy at quarterback. He can absolutely have a terrible game and just give it to you. But even then, it's like, I think the Eagles would run for like 800 yards on us. I think the Cowboys defense would just eat us alive. So I can't imagine it going any further than that.
Yeah, I probably have a little more probably faith that we could make a run theoretically than Brendon does on this. Certainly I think that the injury situation that we're dealing with right now, especially when it comes to receiver, might be the thing that kind of keeps you back. But when I look at a couple of matchups you could run into, the Eagles are not playing their best brand of football. They're a very talented team. At one point or another, they're one of the best teams, are playing like the best team in football, but they're not at that point anymore. And you may be dealing with them with Jalen Hurts in the playoffs with that arm isn't in the greatest of shape. And so you're catching them in a little bit more of a weakened state than what they were to start off the year, mid-year, whatnot. What Brendon just said about the Vikings, I'd apply as well. I get to play a playoff team that has the worst defense in football. I think I got myself a little bit of a chance in that particular game. The Niners one would be the odds are long, but again, you can find a reason within it when you look at, okay, Deebo Samuel's kind of coming back from a knee injury that's going to have him a little bit dodgy. And then you are down to a 3rd string quarterback who you could make the argument, and I would make the argument, is probably playing a little bit over his head versus where he will land when he eventually settles down into the player he is. He is limited from an arm talent standpoint. And there is a point in time that it's going to come down to where that's going to show, even with all of the good parts that the Niners have. Do I think we would make the run? No. But do I see a possibility if you start to come together and play some really good football, the balance of you on running the ball and passing the ball is more now to 50-50 rather than Geno having to throw it 75% of the time? You got a chance at that point. But I think that the Niners are going to make themselves a nice run here. I think they're playing the best football at the right time of year. And when all things are said and done, we probably don't make it through. That's interesting on the Cowboys. You're probably right on that with their defense and offense that able to do just enough, especially running the ball as the Cowboys can do. That's probably not a great stylistic matchup for you if you had to take them on, It's a good point on that one.
And as for the second part of this question, I mean, we've already kind of proven that, right? Like, we have a better record than we did last year with Russ. Our offense is much better than it was with Russ.
Yeah.
So I think that statement's actually already been made, especially with what's going on in Denver.
I agree. That message coming to Russell has been sent and heard loud and clear. And look, they didn't softly go into this with Russ, right? Where Carroll's like, hey, boo him if you want to boo him. you know, and, talking about armbands and stuff. And Carroll's been kind of twisting the knife in a way that I quite frankly haven't seen Carroll do before, which I'm not saying I'm against it, but he's definitely twisted a little bit of the knife on Russ throughout the course of the year, and with Russ's year as well. I don't know if there's any more message that's going to resonate any louder than it's already resonated to Russ. And, if he's not eating the humble pie by this point, he ain't never eaten that pie. He's going to just completely I don't see it, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, shout out to the Denver beat reporters, by the way. I don't know if you've been watching any of the Wilson conferences. They go at him in a way that the Seattle reporters never would go at anybody.
I love it. I haven't had a chance to check it out. I saw he was getting a little emotional on the podium talking about the people having his back. But
yeah, there was. It was the day after Hackett got fired. He was doing one press conference, and somebody asked him, how appealing do you think the job is for a coach? And he started talking about, we have a great history here. We've won Super Bowls. It's a historic franchise. And then a few minutes later at the end of the conference, one of the reporters asked, okay, we know about the history of the organization. We know about, this place. We know about this fan base. But do you acknowledge that if you do not play better next year, it's not an appealing job for a head coach? And then Wilson said, like, oh, yeah, I understand. We have to be better. And then the guy was like, no, not we. I'm talking about
you. What did Wilson say on that? Was he like,
he didn't like it. He kind of left right after that.
Yeah.
He did not appreciate. I don't think he appreciated it.
That's the reporter's job in that point. And look, when you're playing that bad, you can hit it, but Russell put himself into the situation. If he had just not, and almost just by dictating and asking the contract before he played a single down, and some of the things you do in the background. If you're going to ask for that stuff, you've got to be good to back it up. It's like you're the stories about The Rock with this Black Adam thing coming out, where it's like he's trying to dictate to these DC people and all that's like, yeah, when you're Rock and you're bringing in $1 billion franchises left and right over here and there, like, yeah, they'll put up with it. But then when you're dictating stuff like, it gets too crazy, then they're going to turn on you when it's a little bit much. You got to bring the goods on that side of it. But good on Denver. I like it when reporters are actually doing their job and really like holding feet to the fire. That is their job.
Yeah, I think right after the Carolina game, there was one press conference he did, and somebody asked him, like, hey, Wilson, are you washed up? And I was like, well, okay, get right to the point.
Holy hell.
I was like,
that's going hard in the paint on that one. So
yeah.
They got to be struggling, Brendon. There's no easy, if you were covering that team, like, where are the easy answers on this? What can I come to think of outside the box? I mean, you got their fans, like the one guy did, like showing how they could get out of Russell's contract this offseason if they remove this contract, if they extend Sutton, if they move this guy's money over to here, then they can find their way out of his deal. I mean, they've got him to that kind of crazed a spot as far as their desperation goes. And so, I'm sure the reporters are kind of feeling a little bit of that from the fan base.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in fairness, Wilson never played bad like he's played this year, like in Seattle, the way he's played this year. No. Maybe if Wilson played this badly in Seattle reporters would have gone at him a little bit. I don't know.
It's true. I definitely wouldn't have they definitely wouldn't have asked him if he was washed up. That's definitely that's a Denver special right there. That would have been no way. I could just see like the whole rest of the reporters would probably turn on him in that moment if they asked a question like that.
Yeah.
Rob's with a $7 dono. Thank you, Rob's. Hope you're having a good night. All of you guys out there, thank you so much for all the donations. Goodness. What's the plan for this draft? Because I believe in offense or defense, because we have this huge pick and we have to think 2 to 3 seasons ahead. Quarterback or defensive end?
Yeah. I mean, let's think here. So the top 5 with trade ups is probably the 3 quarterbacks, Carter, Anderson. That's kind of how you feel?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'd be my spot on it. I think the plan for the draft's really about trenches, isn't it, Brendon? I mean, in certain respects here, you've got an opening on 2 spots on your offensive line minimum. Your defensive line could use help all the way around. So, what's the plan? I believe in offense or defense because we have this huge pick and we have to think 2 to 3 seasons ahead. So I think if you're talking about thinking 2 to 3 seasons ahead, Robs, and you want to get to being an elite team, one of the quickest, easiest places to getting an elite team, not just this year or 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago, but invest in the trenches. Our center position has been miserable for a couple of years. Our guard situation, one way or another, Lewis is doing okay, but we need more at the guard. And again, every defensive line position, you can make an argument you need help. Brian Monet's got a torn ACL. Al Woods is getting older than dirt. You've got no answers there really going forward. Poona Ford's probably going to be released. Both your defensive ends need help on that side of things. Maybe Shelby Harris is the only guy you feel good about. Maybe Miles Adams in addition to it. That's, to me, as much as like getting position specific, get the trenches dealt with.
Yeah, as for playing overall this draft, I think that's probably. I think you need a linebacker now too, pretty badly with Brooks's injury. Like you don't know how he's going to come back from that because he's a player who depends on his athleticism heavily.
Agreed. He's reduced as a player if he's coming back a step slower or not quite as quick as he once was, and against late season injury too. So good chance he's not ready to go by the start of the year with these kind of ACLs. Like we saw Rashad Penny have this kind of thing, and it took him a whole nother extra year to get back from it when he had I think he was even earlier than Brooks sustained this particular injury at this point in time of the year. So I still would go with Carter or Anderson as the first and foremost Robs rather than going quarterback, even if it is Stroud there on the board. I know a lot of people do love Stroud, but I still just like those guys and think they're really, truly difference makers on the defensive side of the ball. I'm not quite as convinced of that with the quarterback position at this point.
Yeah. I think that pretty much 98% of Seahawks fans would get behind the Jalen Carter pick if we make it.
Yeah, it does appear like people are pretty well in favor of that one, all on board. So that'd be my route with it, Robs. That'd be the way I'd go. So thank you for the $7 donation, though, man. Appreciate you. Guard Knight with the $5 donation. If you don't understand, Levis is a poor man's Josh Allen by now. Just draft the kid from Florida. There you go.
I mean, poor man's Josh Allen wouldn't be a bad thing. Like,
no,
I could live with that.
No,
Josh Allen is really good.
Yeah, he is. I mean, you're talking about like, okay, Josh Allen's a top 3 quarterback in this sport, and instead now I'm getting a top 10, right? If we're going by that thing, and I think potentially Levis has got potentially top 10 upside in the sport. Do I think it's top 5 potential? No, but could he get in the top 10 in the sport as a quarterback? And if I'm fitting to that blueprint, like I talked about, the Hawks are trying to fit to, where it is that 2012 blueprint, is a guy like Levis, if I build a super team around him, going to be able to play great? I think he would, Brendan. And I know this is hard for some people because they look at his stats, but he would be getting the complete opposite, not at 1 position, not at 2 positions, not at 3 positions, not at 4 positions, at all the positions on the offensive line. Receivers, running backs would be starkly improved as far as, not just them being pros, but them actually being able to help him and make his performance look better because the players he's got at Kentucky do not do that right now. So I like Richardson too. I think he's going to take a couple years. I don't like him in the first round, but Allen's he's going to shock a lot of people, man. I've had so many people in my chat go, there's no way that guy even goes in the first round. What are you smoking? I go, hey, he's going to be, it's not how the front offices around the league are going to view the situation. And
I mean, worst case scenario, he goes into the top 10 for the same reason that guys like Blaine Gabbert go in the top 10 because he looks like he should be a good quarterback.
Exactly. And that in itself may not be the right reasons, but it doesn't mean it's going to preclude him from still being picked there. And I agree that alone might be enough to do it. But I happen to also kind of agree with the thought process that he is going to be way improved if you can put him behind a team that's just got more to work with than what he had at Kentucky. I feel like he had a lot, say nothing of the fact the guy's been working out of a pro style system, which none of these quarterbacks in this draft right now, from Stroud to Young to Anthony Richardson, none of them are operating out of a pro style offense that are going in this first round. And that does also give you a built-in advantage, especially to hit the ground running, especially to be for those teams that might think they're a little closer than further away if they want to pick him up. Mm-hmm. So where that trade comes in at 5, Brendan, where if we trade out with Levis, there. Garth, thank you for the $5 donation. I like them both, man. I like them both. Rob's with a $2.79 donation. Will Lockett and Goodwin retire? We draft 4 wide receiver. I've had a couple people asking me about with Lockett. Are you getting some smoke that he's thinking of retirement somewhere? I wasn't seeing anything, but I have heard a couple people bring it up to me. So
I don't know why he would, unless he wants to go be a realtor.
Yeah.
I don't know if he thinks being a realtor is going to pay better than his $15 million a year NFL contract. But I mean, there's some really big houses out there you can sell, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think Rob's, I look at it like he's had a lot of attention for a while now to continue to be able to play into his 30s, and that he's not been a guy that he, necessarily is looking to get out of the sport this time. He takes care of his body. I think some of that going down early is something that opens the door to is him having a more sustained ability to play for a couple extra more years than he would be able to if he's a guy that was just throwing his body all over the place, a little bit a la like maybe Doug Baldwin was doing and why he kind of was breaking down a little bit as he was getting close to the end there. Goodwin retiring. I don't think he would retire if the Seahawks were willing to bring him back on something similar to what they did this year. So, if I think he's a guy that he mentioned at the start of training camp, Robs, that he really, really appreciated this opportunity and chance he had. He recognized he's not going to get a lot more of these kind of chances. Struck me as a guy who really appreciated the opportunity he was getting to be able to still play football. Not a guy that was kind of done with football and over it. And he's kind of, I played my games. I'm beat up. I'm tired. Let me call it a day. So I think no in both of those cases, man. I think there's a good chance. I think Lockett absolutely returns, and I think there's a really good chance Goodwin returns too. He's been a good player for us this year.
Yeah, I mean, we could still draft a receiver potentially, but I don't think it'll be because those guys retire.
Yeah, I do agree with you on that, Robs. I'm in favor of looking at a receiver in this draft, and you can look in a variety of different spots from my perspective of it. But I think addressing the receiver position would be smart because we can't look at Goodwin as an answer going forward, and even if, or look at Eskridge as an answer going forward. And even if Goodwin, is brought back, he is still a little bit of an aging guy who has had an injury past to him. This isn't just the first year that he's had a couple injuries here already with us, and he's had quite a few throughout his career. Nothing super major, but enough to where to count on him to play a full 17 game season. It's a little bit of like we talk about Brendan with the looking again through that different lens of, it's not about them playing 17 games. It's about getting that, give me that 10 game chunk where you're a solid addition. I'll find another guy for 7 games to fill back in on you at that point on the back end. That's really where it comes down to on that.
I agree.
Well, good news, you guys. It took me probably took me damn near an hour to catch up on all the donations here in the chat. So thank you. Thank you for all the donations. You guys are very kind on that as always. Let's drive this forward a little bit more on this game now, Brendan. I think we've kind of broke down both sides of this matchup. We both come to the point on this. Okay, you got to run the ball. We want to maybe try to hem down a little bit of the fly sweep stuff as far as defensively speaking that was gashing you before. Certainly putting this ball in Baker Mayfield's hand with the wide receiver depth as it is probably a pretty smart for our defense to try to do that, like they did last week with who did we play last week? Oh yes, White. So
yeah.
So I think that would be what you want to apply this given week, Brendan. Where do you see this go from a score standpoint? How do you see this game playing out?
I'm gonna say Seahawks 27, Rams 13.
Ooh, I like that score.
Yeah, I think we win. I think we feel good about it. I think it goes well, but I don't think it's a crazy blowout. I think that the defense found a little bit of a pass rush against a bad offensive line last week. I think they can keep that up. I think that the defensive line is going to have a chance to feast a little bit against a pretty lackluster interior offensive line over there in LA. Both their guards have been playing terrible this year, and they've got a backup center now if Brian Allen's out. So, yeah, that sounds about right to me. I think we just maintain a good balance. Hopefully we jump on them the way we jumped on the Jets. That was a key to that game, of course, being able to rush the passer as much as we did.
Yeah, you get on a team like this and they're already kind of looking for that excuse to kind of all right, not our day, not our year. Let's cash this in. And the way you do that is you get on top of that team quick. You let them kind of hang around a little bit and they start feeling themselves a little bit. And then you get in the second half and it can get a bit dodgy. I love your score though. I don't know if I can go much differently off of that because I see something similar. So maybe I'll go 24-10. But I could see it, 24-14. I do think we win by more than 10 points in this game, no matter what. The offense does enough, and they're so shorthanded is the Rams, and we need this game. We're playing for something they're not. I think that becomes a little bit of an equalizer for us in itself in this particular game. So absolutely see our Hawks coming away with this. We'll see if the other teams can kind of do their work on their side of it. But I feel pretty good about the prediction on this one. Easy to make when you've got the Rams down half of their roster. It's a little bit easier a little easier when they're out of the battle, not in the playoff contention, and they've got nobody to play for, including maybe what we'd say probably, Brendan, they're down like 6, 7 of their most important offensive players, maybe, if not more.
Stafford,
Allen.
Allen. Does Darrell Henderson count because they cut him?
No, he doesn't count.
Okay, Allen.
No Bloom.
No Bloom. Does Alshon Jeffrey count? Oh no, I'm sorry, not Alshon Jeffrey.
Allen Robinson counts.
Allen Robinson.
Cooper Kupp.
Cooper Kupp.
We said Stafford. We said Stafford, right?
Yeah, there was, I think, one other receiver. I don't know. Maybe
Skull wreck.
Yeah, if he's out,
He's
that's actually
out.
a big deal.
Higbee's questionable, so he might be included in that.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm missing somebody, but that's still quite a few guys you're down at this point coming into it. So we should be able to pull this one off. Hopefully. Dear God. Mark Sanchez coming in with a big fat $20 donation upon the 10. Thank you, Mark. You are awesome for all your donations to the channel. He came in with a big 50 on Brendon the last week. And so big time support on the channel for my guy, Mark. Appreciate you, brother. Says, okay, guys, terrible draft scenario. If the Texans take Will Anderson and the Bears take Carter, what would you guys like the Hawks to do in that scenario? Sometimes teams don't always pick for their obvious needs. Very true. Very true.
At this point, I still have flexibility. I'm just taking CJ Stroud. I think he's really good. I don't hate that.
I can't argue with taking the Stroud, Mark, and really I wish I could be more of a guy that just says, this is what I want to do then if that happens there. But there's as I say with this draft, at the top of the draft especially, I'm a little more dodgy when you get into the depth of this draft. But when you're talking about inside the top 20 picks, I don't think there's a lot of places our Hawks can really go wrong or will go wrong at that spot. My preference wouldn't be necessarily to take Stroud. I'm going to anticipate this question, Mark, as, you know, if I don't have, I'll say it like this, Mark, if I've re-signed Geno Smith, I move that back. I move that pick. There'll be some quarterback hungry team that's willing to give me the sun, moon, and stars to move up for that pick. If I don't take Geno Smith, if I bring back Drew Lock, then I'm taking CJ Stroud in addition to having Drew Lock on the team. So I have a little more faith in what I got from Geno. There's a little more question there at that versus that one, but I would try to move back, Mark, because I think that at that point, you're going to have a team that's going to think they're getting the best quarterback in this draft moving up to your spot. And historically speaking, that means 3 first-round picks and maybe 2 second-round picks potentially. Something to that near equivalency if you look at the historical markers on that. And I can't turn that down. That would be insane value to me at that point. I mean, you would have at that point turned that Russell deal into, what would that be, Brendon? That'd be 4 first-round picks, or no, that'd be, sorry. So you got 3 plus the 2. So you're at 5 plus the 4. That'd mean that Russell Wilson would come out to 5 first-round picks and to 4 second-round picks in total, and on top of the players that you got in addition to that. I don't know if I can turn that down. I don't know if I can say no to that.
It's too. I don't know if there's a team that has like 2 first-round picks you could trade with. Like, could you do it with like Detroit maybe? Because they have.
Well, it'd be a 3 first-round pick situation. So it would be successive years, but that's why you're getting the 2 second-round picks, the second-round picks in successive years as well. So yeah, you're having to wait on some of the returns to come out in that 3-year period, but you also have the second-round picks to augment that a little bit. And again, Brendon, as I was doing the research on this, when you look at those teams that take that risk and that gamble for like, well, let's see what happens where that team's at 3 years down the road. We're going to like their first-round pick maybe 3 years down the road. That Washington team that moved up for Robert Griffin, and that drop back that they did, the Rams did, they got the best first-round pick of that in the 3rd year of those picks, in the 3rd first-round year of that pick. It was a top 6 pick at that point from Washington they were getting back. And that's where I go on the road of this. If there wasn't such a great baseline of this, if we didn't have teams like the Saints this year, or the Eagles this year, or the who's the other team that got a good pick, or the Lions, they're going to see themselves get a damn good first-round pick. And none of those teams thought they were giving those assets away when they initially were giving those up. The Rams didn't think they're going to be giving the Rams a top 10 pick essentially in this draft this year. That was not the deal with that Goff trade. They thought, well, we'll give them a back end 20s type pick. And if they knew that it was that pick, they would. Do you think they would make that trade still? I mean, maybe enough to get the Super Bowl, but it makes them hesitant, right? Makes them think twice.
Is Stafford? Do they win that Super Bowl with Jared Goff? Like, looking back on it, probably not, right?
Probably not with the run that Stafford had in the playoffs, especially. I'd argue that Stafford didn't give them something that was some next level ability during the regular season of that year, but he did go on one of those kind of special type of runs for the quarterback position in the playoffs. When you need it on the line, he was playing his best. I don't know if Goff gives you that same kind of level of play. It's a good question though, because that was you still have Von Miller and Aaron Donald and Leonard Floyd and, there's Jalen Ramsey, and that offensive line still pretty well set up at that point. So it's a good question to ask, but I think they probably make the deal because it has gotten them a Super Bowl. But some of the other deals that were made out there for these kind of, do the Saints look at that with Trevor Penning and go, well, that was a good pick on our part. That was smart. I don't think they do.
I think that's a disaster. Yeah.
I think it's a disaster too. And certainly the Broncos giving up their first round picks to us, they ain't loving that. So I'd go that route, Mark. I like the trade down part. I really think you're going to be able to get a haul at that point. So it's still a good situation for us, even if those first two guys, I wouldn't say it's a terrible draft scenario, because it just means we're going to end up with the treasure troves of draft picks instead. We'll dry our tears on the draft picks. Thank you though, Mark. You're awesome for the $20 dono, brother. I really appreciate you. Roy Froelich said with a $3 donation. Appreciate you, Roy. Says, should we take J.M. Schmidt with our second rounder?
He's on the list for sure. He's probably become the best center in this draft. I don't know if he's the best fit for us, but he is the best center, I think.
Yeah, I agree, Roy. It's, the ideal would be able to find a really highly mobile center who could also handle some things at the point of attack. That would be the ideal prototype center for this offense. Unfortunately, that prototype's not really come out over the last couple of drafts. Linderbaum a little bit last year, but just not really. Not to the exact same. Even a guy like Creed Humphrey wasn't really a fit to that. Schmidt's enough of a fit to it where he would be good. He would help this offense out. He'd be an improvement at the center position versus what we've had in recent years. You might have to overdraft him a little bit to get him at that point. But if you're walking away, Roy, with the best center in this draft, it means over the last 2 years at that point, you've walked away with the best left tackle, with the best right tackle, and with the best center in the last 2 drafts. And if that's not the makings of a damn good offensive line going forward, and of an offensive line that can compete and be a top 3 type group, a top 3 type unit, I don't know what is, especially with Damian Lewis starting to round out as he is at the left guard position. And then it just becomes a question of the right guard at that point. Appreciate you, Roy. And Garth with another donation. Garth, you're awesome, man. Like 8 donations tonight. Appreciate you. It says, Killer Bees are the best. Happy New Year to you both. Thank you, Garth. Happy New Year to you too, man.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
Hope you're doing well out there. And thank you for all the donations, man. Hope Happy New Year to everybody out there. UPO with a $10 donation. No points to make here. Just wanted you guys to know I appreciate your time and effort in giving us good content. Have a safe and happy 2023. Go Hawks. Thank you, UPO. Guys are so kind, man. We really do appreciate it over here. We love what we do on this. It's been really great having an opportunity here to team up here with Brendon over this last couple of years period, to be able to really dive into this with someone else on this. So we're going to keep doing it, man. And we're just starting to already kind of turn over our ideas, UPO, for this offseason. I think obviously for us, for agency and draft will be very easy coverages. We know what we need to do with that. But we're going to be kind of getting, I think, a little bit creative as we get through January into February, and kind of going a little bit outside the box on maybe some of these shows and what we kind of look at with this team. And if you guys got something that you want as we had somebody above, present a potential with Brendon playing the part of John Schneider and me playing Carol, let's please do put it in there in the chat if you guys got a suggestion for us on a given show that we could cover a given topic. I think some historical shows we'll do at some point too, Brendon. You and I will argue over who's the best running back and linebacker in Seahawks history. That kind of great content on it. But appreciate you, UPO. Thank you so much, man. Robbie Red with a $2 donation. Appreciate you as well, Robbie. Any notable free agents that the Seahawks should target? This is a tough one.
We're going to do probably 3 or 4 shows about free agent targets, but I would definitely make a play at Deron Payne and maybe Mitch Morse. Lower tier, maybe a guy like Clowney. Off the top of my head, that's about it.
Yeah, I would say those guys he mentioned, I'd be right on board with him, Robbie Red. Maybe if you need to find a cheap, semi-cheap fill-in for Jordan Brooks and you don't want to go in the draft on it, or you want to go in the draft and do something with Cody Barton as well. Denzel Perryman with the Raiders might be a guy that you could take a look at. He's had a pretty good year for them at the middle linebacker position. But it is tiny bit early on at Robbie, because so many of the guys that are listed on Sports Track right now that might be due to be free agents won't be. A lot of them are going to be franchised, a lot of them contract extension or on trades. It makes it really highly unpredictable. But then on top of being unpredictable at this point, we need some more releases. We need this to get more filled out. This free agent class at first look is pretty unimpressive. This is not a class that you look at and go, man, there's this answer here we can do, and that answer there, and this guy here, and this guy here. No, it's like, well, there's this guy and that guy. Like the guys he mentions, kind of about it. It's very much a thin free agent market. With that said, though, Robbie, we will be doing shows absolutely concentrating just specifically on positions and these guys. And when we get a little closer to understanding who's truly going to be the free agents, we'll absolutely get into the depths of it. But it would be those guys kind of off the top with it. Garth Knight with another $5 donation. Thank you, Garth. Appreciate you. Says, enjoy the Russell Hall with no Super Bowl or playoffs. Congrats to the picks And bullshit.
I mean, all things considered, I guess things couldn't have gone too much better, realistically. So
No.
I'm pretty happy with it.
And the way that this could have turned dark, Garth, I mean, this could have been a situation where we came in this year, ended up seeing we had the worst roster in football, ended up missing out on all these draft picks, right? Guys started underwhelming across the board. Carroll gets exposed as being the game passing him by and just can't get the team coached up anymore to getting there. Boy, you start looking at that type of team and where you're working off in the worst case scenario. This right now looks like is about as best case scenario as it gets for how it has played out. And it's been very encouraging. It's gone this way, man. So yeah, I'm going to enjoy it. I'm enjoying it, Garth. I'll tell you that. I'm loving it. It's
going to make a much more fun off season than usual, right?
Oh boy, will it ever. Me and Brendon haven't gotten the chances when we've had our channels to cover going over a top 5 pick. And like, I'm doing my Will Anderson video and I'm loving it. We get to look over these really insane, talented guys at the top of the draft who we always used to have to kind of sit on our hands and like look fondly off into the distance at, like, would be nice to get that guy, not this year. We get our pick of the litter almost for all intents and purposes. And that makes this draft even more so exciting than anyone I've probably ever covered or gone after as a Seahawks fan. Even back in the days when we had the two draft picks off the Galloway trade and whatnot. This one's even still better because I kind of know these players. Appreciate you though, Garth. Eric Gilbertson with a $2 donation says Seaside Joe trade with Denver, our third for Surtain plus the 49ers first.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Not even a consideration. I laugh and hang up the phone if I'm John Schneider and I get this offer from, what's the name of the Denver GM? Patton?
That's right. George Patton.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would be the same way, Eric. I think the first round pick from the Niners could very well end up finding out being like 30, 31 or 32 even, maybe, who knows? So you're at the back.
No. It actually can't be because the Dolphins forfeited their pick.
Oh, that's right. So it could be 30 or 31. So it's not going to be a good first round pick, first off. The other thing with Surtain is that he's just about to be rounding into another year here where you're going to have to be paying him soon. So you're not getting like a lot of the cheap 3 years of his contract. So no, I wouldn't want to do that at all. I just, no, especially look at their corner situation. We're stacked up right now. We got a log jam right now,
Yeah. I'd rather trade the third to get Russell Wilson back at that point.
Exactly.
No, but I'm not doing that.
You're saying it's just illustrating that that's how much you don't want to do the move at all. It's like, it's not, and I don't want to do it either. I want to stay, give me that pick. Let me sit on my picks, let me make those picks. We'll get better players, get them on the cheap contract. I like Surtain, but I think our corners are good enough right now. It's the front seven when needs the help, not the secondary at this point. We've done a lot for the secondary. Thank you, Eric. Max, thank you for the $5 don't know. Hope you're doing well tonight. Happy New Year to you too. Should we double down on defense with either our 2 first-round picks or split offense, defense?
I would not think about it like this. Once you get to your pick, you make the best decision with that pick. You don't worry about, I took defense with this pick, so I have to take offense here. So I wouldn't look at it like this.
Yeah, Max, I'm fiercely in this direction of things. And I frankly think that it had a lot to do with the success that they had in last year's draft, being that they stuck to the best player available. They come to their pick. Who is the best player available on your board? Who's your highest rated guy? And I understand there may be some select times you can't do that. If we came up to our first pick this year and our highest rated guys, Peter Skoronski or Paris Johnson of Ohio State tackles, it's probably not going to be the guy we take. But as much as you can apply that, that's why you apply that. And if you're in the mode of saying, well, we got to split these 2 first-round picks up, you're leaving very far that mold and that thought process of BPA. And so it's really driving back to who's the best guy on my board. And I think Jalen Carter, for instance, and Anderson, why me and Brendon speak for Brendon on this, why we commonly go to those guys is, yes, we love those as players. Yes, we love those guys as fits, but they're also better than the equivalent offensive players you could be getting there. Better than the receiver you could grab, better than there's no tight ends, or better than a center, right? Better than a running back, that's the best guys at that spot to go pick there. Those are the BPAs. And the same thing I'd apply to the second first round pick as well, Max. And if they do that, that will drive the success of this draft, much like this last draft was driven by the success of them applying this same model, which has been a little bit different than the model they've run other drafts as. Brendon and I have been able to look at other drafts and go, look, that's a draft being driven by what you need on your team, not what was the best player that you had, right? You made a pick of Darrell Taylor. You traded a 3rd round pick and moved up in the 2nd round because you were hoping he was going to supply you instantaneous pass rush. You weren't doing that because, well, our pass rush was great, but we could use a little back end help on it. No, you're hoping the guy was going to be some desperate part of that pass rush and apply it instantly. And that's where you start to go wrong in given drafts. That's where things start to kind of go off the tracks a little bit. So just completely, we're going to stay in the pocket of that BPA as far as the way me and Brennan apply this, Max, and just the way we kind of look at this. I think it's the smartest approach. And that's what most organizations have the best draft success. When you look at it up and down, look at the Ravens year in and year out. They don't draft for need. They'll draft for the BPA, and they'll come out of it with the best rosters. And now they haven't gotten back to the Super Bowl recent, but they have a couple of Super Bowl wins over the last 20 years, kind of applying the same sort of model with the success that they've had with it. So thank you, though, Max. You're awesome for the donation, brother. Appreciate you. Thank you for all the donations in the chat. Well, we got just a little bit past 2 hours here, and so we probably will kind of start to wrap this up here a little bit, Brendan. We've got our scores on the button here. If you had to predict the way that this will play out, and I know I'm asking you to basically just, flip a coin almost a little bit here, right? Who knows what you're going to get from a Lions team going into Lambeau? Who knows what Packer team shows up? How does this play out on Sunday? How does this all kind of factor in? Give me all the way down with Denver too. Give me your the full strength on this.
I'm going to say Denver finds a way to lose regardless. I'm going to say they lose to a Chargers team that doesn't play their full starters.
Kind of a final insult, like for us.
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on what Denver team shows up. But that Denver team that played against the Rams 2 weeks ago, they wouldn't beat the Chargers backups.
Yep. Well, you're dealing with Rams third stringers at times, guys they've got off the streets and you couldn't stop them. So I agree. Yeah.
So I'm going to say our pick settles at 3.
Okay.
Because the Bears are not going to beat the Vikings with Nathan Peterman.
No.
So that's that. I do think we beat the Rams, but it's just, I'm going to say it again. It's really hard for me to believe the Lions are going to go into Lambeau with nothing to play for, which would be the case if we win, and find a way to beat a team that is in a win and in with all the energy of the league wanting Green Bay to make the playoffs. So
are you inferring that perhaps they might get some calls in that game, Brendan? Are you saying the Packers might have the officials a little slanted in their direction, or am I misreading your inference?
It's also tiresome.
It is indeed. I agree with you, man. I think all of that plays out probably the way that you said, and I don't think the Lions. It'll be just enough with the Packers going for it. The Lions at that point probably taking their, even if it's just you slightly take your foot off the gas in Lambeau in January, you're going to lose that game. Say nothing of the Packers trying to play for their whole season in their game at that point. I think that they'll give them a strong enough hit that the Lions just won't quite be able to do it on the road. If this was at Detroit, maybe I'd give it the nod to Detroit. But in Lambeau, it's one of the toughest places to play in the NFL, especially in the winter, in the depths of winter at that. So we got one more donation here, Brendan. Adrian X with a $2 dono. Thank you, Adrian X. At 3 or 4, I don't want an Aaron Curry. No threat of that happening, luckily, this year. There is no Aaron Currys that'll be at the top of this draft. That was really a draft driven, and that might have been one of the worst years we could have possibly been picking the top 5 in the last 30 years of NFL drafts. If you look at the first round of that draft, there might have been 3 or 4 guys that were actually pretty decent players. Everybody else was a pretty big bust by and large. So, no offense out there to Mark Sanchez who's listening. but Curry was a guy that, was looked at as a Lawrence Taylor type. And some of that was, yes, she flashed at Wake Forest to a degree, but some of that was the weakness of that particular draft. Jalen Carter and Will Anderson are on a completely, different level. And if you talk about Miles Murphy or that kind of guy, I think even those guys at least will have a little bit of a higher floor than what Curry was able to establish when he was playing here. So I think we'll be okay. I also always reference Adrian X. You've picked from John Schneider's standpoint 4 times in the top 15 over the last 15 years. All 4 of those picks has John Schneider knocked it out of the park. And it is much easier to pick in that tier 1 group than it is the tier 2 group. He is not Schneider, Tim Ruskell. Tim Ruskell was his own kind of beast in the players he'd look for in drafts. And his process would be a little bit wrong at times in his application of it. And Schneider doesn't inhibit himself in the same kind of way that would have him scared off of certain prospects like Ruskell would. Mm-hmm. What do you think? Agree. Are there any Currys that you see in this draft, or are we good?
I mean, maybe the Aaron Curry would be like someone like Andre Carter II.
Yeah.
Because he played for a small school.
1 year production.
Yeah, and he had like dominant production, but he was playing for Army. And that's a guy who will probably be like a second round pick. So no, not an Aaron Curry.
Yeah. There's definitely going to be some guys in the second round that get picked that I think are going to be very busty because I don't like this tier 2 group, Adrian X, but not in tier 1. If you're picking in tier 1, you're going to get a really solid, fine player there at that point, and you should feel good about that. So we'll avoid it this year, unfortunately. Fortunately enough, we're not picking in a bad first round draft like that one was. I mean, if you go back and look, Brendan, it is Eugene Monroe's and oh my God, it's up and down, just not good. I think like Clay Matthews was like the only guy in that first round that turned out fairly decently at the end of the day. Well, look, thank you to everybody tonight for the donations. You guys are amazing for all the support to both me and Brendan's channel. We really do appreciate it on that. We will be keeping these going. We're going to be over on Brendan's channel. And if you're not, I forget, should I say, if you're not subscribed, do me this favor, go over to Seahawks Brendon Nelson, type that in the YouTube search bar, head over to his channel, and subscribe over to him because we go back and forth between each of our channels. We do these shows twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we'll be back on his channel doing a game wrap up of this Ram.
The wrap up is on your channel.
Oh yeah, that's right. My bad. Sorry, I'm off. My bad. Wrap up's back on my channel, and then we'll probably maybe something on Thursday. Look at doing, depending on if we're in the playoffs or not. Yeah, we'll be doing a game preview of the playoffs. So we'll wait to see what we do, but we'll keep the schedule going on as we go forward on this. Do please go get subscribed to Seahawks Brendon Nelson. Do please hit the like button on this video as well, as long as also subscribe to me if you're not subscribed already. Thank you guys, all of you, for all of the donations into the channel. Again, just want to thank you guys. Are amazing for all the support on the channel and what all you guys do. We got the final game of the year here. Okay. Win or go home. Win or you got to go to lose or you go to Cabo. I don't want to go to Cabo. I want us to still fight. And I think Carroll's going to have this team ready to play. I think this team's going to be ready to play. We're going to put the ball and knock it into the Lions court. And as was said earlier, hopefully the Lions can roar in the way that they do out in nature in that game with Lambeau and do us a favor and take us on into the playoffs and continue on with this magical year. It has been a magical year here doing this show with you, Brendan. Thank you so much for that. I really do appreciate it. It's been awesome all the way through. Let's see if our Seahawks can get this win. I know we've got some people, like you said in the thing, people worrying about the Denver winning and the Texans beating the Colts and then, the doomsday type of scenario that they're driving. But I don't want them to have that doomsday scenario. Do you? I don't want it. We got to bring them over to the light, man. We can't let them sit in that negativity about the worst case scenario. We got to have them in the best case scenario, right? Right? Am I off on this? So let's come over to the best case scenario. Think with that glass half full. Things are going to go right this weekend. Okay. I don't know if we'll get the playoffs, but I'm with Brendan on this. I don't trust that Broncos team. I don't care who they're playing against. I don't care who they're resting against. I don't trust them. So keep the faith, my fellow Hawks fans. And we'll remind you, because I know some of you are forgetting on this as you're looking at that doomsday scenario. Don't ever forget, even after a great magical year like this, where maybe you're not forgetting, you might. So I just want to catch you and pull you back from that. Don't you ever forget. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.